Hey guys, before I get right into my Mean Streets of Gadgetzan set review, I just want to remind you that Amazon Coins is something that is always available 24/7 year-round, and right before you buy your Mean Streets of Gadgetzan packs, you should absolutely look into that because it's going to save you a ton of money. I'm somebody that binge buys a ton of packs because I'm a filthy degenerate, and I always do it through Amazon Coins because, like, rather than getting I get $500 of packs for like 375 doing it, because when you buy coins you just save money. Like, it's much cheaper. So trust me, legitimate company. Amazon really helps support Hearthstone streamers by sponsoring us so we can spread the gospel of wonderful Hearthstone savings. And even though the code tempo may not apply, you should still check it out. It's going to be a top link right here in the description. Make sure you click on that. It helps me out. Shows Amazon that you guys care, and thank them for supporting me and a bunch of other Hearthstone streamers. And let's jump right into the set review. What's up, guys? It's Reynad back once again with the only set review that matters. I'm going to be reviewing Mean Streets of Gadgetzan today. All the cards were revealed just yesterday, and I'm excited to talk about all the cards, just my general opinion on them, how I think they'll fit into certain archetypes, what new archetypes they'll be creating, most importantly. My set review is always focused on like how these cards may or may not change the game, rather than like, oh, here's this existing deck that everyone's playing already. Maybe this will see play in that deck, maybe it won't. I don't really like doing reviews that way, so it'll be more of open-minded on stuff, and it'll sound way off on some cards, but hopefully hit the nail on the head a few times. So anyway, Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, I'd say overall is the highest power level expansion ever released. I think Blizzard was very aware of the fact that this will be the largest card pool in a single format of all time. Like, the current standard format will have more cards available total that you can play with compared to any other standard format in the past. So because of that, because there's more cards, the cards need to be stronger in order to actually see play, because they're competing against more expansions, right? So that's, Blizzard is very cognizant of that fact, and they made this set pretty broken in a lot of ways. So let's just get into it. I'm going to start with Druid and just go class by class and get into the neutrals at the end. So first and foremost, we got Mark of the Lotus for Druid, which is a 1-mana spell. It says give your minions +1/+1. So in order to talk about this card, I kind of have to talk about the 3-mana ramp spell. So let me actually back up and start by doing Pilfered Power first. The 3-mana ramp spell. So you gain an empty mana crystal for each friendly minion. So a lot of the hype about Druid in this set is all about the Jade tokens, whereas I actually think this card, if anything, is what will change the way the deck plays out. Pilfered Power allows the Violet Teacher list of Druid to just have these massive explosive openings where, for 3 mana, if you double ramp, like, that alone is so strong, but if you end up, like, triple ramping or whatever, it's just, this gets out of hand very, very quickly. It's a card that may be a little bit too difficult to get to work in Standard, but in Wild, at least with the Haunted Creeper, it's very powerful. Again, I think the Jade Golem deck is definitely a deck, whereas Pilfered Power, it's like one of two things. Like, either it sees no play, which is more likely, I would say, or it ends up like being the defining Druid card that just decides like so many games based on its power level. But being able to, like, for 3 mana, ramp multiple crystals so early, it just gives you these opening hands that are absurd, right? Even if you use an Innervate and you get a Violet Teacher out or something, and you've dumped a lot of cards essentially to put some dudes on the table, right? You play a Living Root, whatever. And you play Pilfered Power. Your hand's almost empty, but you have like 8 crystals. In the current Druid list, that's totally fine. You draw a Raven Idol, that can give you like 7 mana or more of stuff to play. You draw an Azure Drake that chains you into a Nourish, that chains you into another Nourish. There's just all these like high value cards that as soon as you hit one of them, you're essentially drawing the other card draw spells, and you kind of go infinite. So just having mana in the first place is kind of the key. So Pilfered Power fits in this weird hybrid like token ramp deck, but the tools exist for that kind of deck to be successful now. So in that token style of deck, I'm going to go back to Mark of the Lotus, the 1 mana +1/+1. This is the kind of card that you would actually play in that list. It is better than Power of the Wild in a lot of ways. I just played a double Power of the Wild Druid deck in DreamHack last weekend, and it's very powerful, and this card would have been better almost always. You're using Power of the Wild for synergies with Violet Teacher. I was using it with Illidan as well. You can Barnes into Violet Teacher, into Mark of the Lotus. Like, the fact that it's half the mana of Power of the Wild is a massive deal. So overall, like in the token decks, this will see play, just because Power of the Wild already sees play, and this card is better. But it's kind of just upgrading the efficiency of a card that already exists, rather than creating an archetype on its own. So there might be a world where you play like 1 Power of the Wild, 2 of these. Power of the Wild is still better sometimes if you have Fandral, for example. They work together, whereas Mark of the Lotus, it doesn't. But I think most of the time the cost, like the fact that this just costs less, is going to be a lot more relevant. So, and the token deck, this will see play, and maybe together with the new token ramp spell, that creates the Violet Teacher archetype of the Druid. This is the thing about the Druid class, by the way. There's so many ways to build it because Innervate and Wild Growth are broken cards, right? You can build Beast Druid, and just because Beast Druid sees no play does not mean it's a bad deck. Beast Druid's actually a fantastic deck. It's better than every Rogue deck in the game. It's better than every Priest deck in the game, but it still sees no play. And it's better than just 2 classes, right? The reason for that is if you're playing Druid on ladder, you're going to want to win because everybody wants to win. So out of the 5 viable Druid decks, everybody's just going to play the best one. And it's not like Warrior where different builds of Druid have different matchups so much. It is kind of that to an extent, but for the most part, the best Druid deck does the same thing as the other Druid decks, but better. Whereas the Warrior, they just play very differently. So, yeah, because of that, it might be the case that the token ramp Druid deck is a thing. I think it will be a deck. The question is, will it see any amount of play? Because in order to see any amount of play at all, it has to be better than every other list of Druid. It has to be better than the existing Malygos Druid. It has to be better than like Gadgetzan Kobold Druid with like no Malygos. It has to be better than Jade Druid. It has to be better than Beast Druid. Is it better than all 4 or 5 of those archetypes? I don't know. We'll find out once we play it with Jade, right? We have to figure out how good Jade is. Without playing it, it's tough to evaluate. So, anyway, moving on, we got Jade Blossom. So in the Jade Druid deck, this card seems like a staple. If you have Coin Wild Growth, you can play it turn 2, which is actually a very big deal. A lot of the Druid decks lately are not really playing 3 mana plays. They're only running like Feral Rage, which you don't usually keep, so you don't usually play it on curve. So, since the days that Shade of Naxxramas rotated out, we haven't really seen Druid playing 3-drops too often. So that's kind of why this card's interesting to me. It actually gives you, a 3 mana play that's proactive. So, my feedback on all the Jade cards is they're definitely playable, right? The deck definitely seems good, but is it like Beast Druid good, where it's good, but it's not as good as like just Barnesing into Gadgetzan and Ragnaros and stuff and just doing the same stuff you're already doing? Like, are the existing Druid decks just better than the Jade Druid decks? I don't know. If they are, then everyone will be like, oh, Jade was such a dumb mechanic, it never saw play, even though it is good, it's playable. But then there's the other side of that where it's better than the existing Druid decks, in which case people just play, Jade decks instead, which are all just broken. Because for them to see more play than the existing Druid deck, which is broken, they have to be super broken. And it might be the case, but until I actually play with them, I can't say for sure. So, long story short, I think the best list of Druid is most likely some sort of Jade spell Druid hybrid. It's between that and token Druid, I would say, just because Beast Druid got so few tools in this expansion. But yeah, we'll see how it works. I think regardless, a format-defining card, 2 format-defining cards that we'll see play together are going to be Barnes and Ragnaros, and I think that almost every deck that you build is going to be built to maximize those cards. Because they're both just like good cards on their own that give you free wins in games you have no business winning. So on top of that, they're both very strong proactive plays. So And they synergize together. So I think Barnes Rag, just because of how powerful those two neutral cards are in like every class, are actually kind of metagame defining cards in this format. Much the same way that Sludge Belcher was when Exramus first came out. You're playing two Sludge Belchers in every single deck. So including Hunter and everything. So yeah, basically, this card is good. You'll only see it frequently on ladder in the first week of the set. You'll only see it on ladder the very first week or 2 weeks that Mean Streets of Gadgetzan is released. And then one of two things will happen. You'll never stop seeing it because it's broken, or you will never see it again like Cthulhu Druid, which, by the way, that's another archetype of Druid that's also a good deck. It's just worse than the Spell Druid ever so slightly. So you don't see it at all. So yeah, I mean, that's my opinion on it. I think there's just so many builds of Druid, and they all do the same thing, which is cross their fingers and hope they draw Innervate Wildgrowth. And whichever deck is better when it draws Innervate Wildgrowth, which right now happens to be the Spell Druid deck, the Malagos one, that's the list that you see played nonstop. So, is this Cthulhu Druid level good? Is it Spell Druid level good or better? Can't say until we play with it. Jade Behemoth, all right, 3/6 taunt, Battlecry, summon a Jade Golem, pretty straightforward. I think that the beauty of the way Druid decks are built right now is there's so much card draw. You're playing double Nourish, you're playing double Azure Drake in basically every list. Your Wrath cycles, your Raven Idol gets you stuff that cycles. You might be playing Gadgetzan Auctioneer. You have Barnes into stuff. It's just, there's a lot of ways to draw cards, and because there's a lot of ways to draw cards, and because of how precious every slot in your deck is going to be after this set is released, I don't think this makes the cut. It's not weak. It's not like it's not overcosted or anything. It's just like, I would rather play a Nourish and like play the 1 mana Jade Idol card, right? It's called Jade Idol, right? Yeah. I'd rather play the 1 mana Jade card and like a Nourish, right? And then go off next turn even more with a bunch of spells, rather than spending a turn playing Jade Behemoth. So I don't think this will see play even in the Jade deck. It's kind of like playing Cthulhu's Chosen and Cthulhu Druid. Like, you can. It'll make your Cthulhu even bigger. This will make your Jade Golems even bigger. But will they be... like, does that mean it's still optimal to play over just cards that draw you into the better Jade Idol cards? That's the question. I don't know. Jade Idol, on the other hand, spells, man. 1 mana spells that just do stuff are so nuts, especially in Druid right now. I mean, people talk about like Arcane Giant being broken, but Arcane Giant isn't even in every Druid deck. You know what is in every Druid deck? Raven Idol. Like, just by like play percentage, Raven Idol is arguably more broken than Arcane Giant. So Jade Idol is yet another 1 mana spell you're playing in Druid. So now you're playing like double Innervate, double Wildgrowth, 6 1 mana spells, right? You have 2 Living Root, 2 Raven Idol, 2 Jade Idol. That's a lot of cheap spell effects, to the point where like I think what you want to be doing is just playing like all the Jade ramp, drawing a bunch of cards, and making a bunch of Jade Golems and Arcane Giants. And then your deck is like 2 Arcane Giants, a Barnes, a Rag, a couple Azure Drakes, and you just like, maybe you don't even play Barnes, but you know what I mean. It's all spells and card draw and this crap. And I think that's probably the best list of Druid. Again, I have to test like every build of it to really know for sure, but Jade Idol seems, it's strong, right? I mean, people are saying it's like broken. I think people are kind of overrating the card. I think the fact that you shuffle stuff into your deck is not as relevant as they think it is. Although the fact that you can do that might mean that double Gadgetzan Auctioneer becomes kind of the standard. I could see that. I could see, because you're playing so few minions, if you play double Gadgetzan and 1 Barnes, it's actually like super powerful, because of how often you're going to hit that. So you only have 4 bad hits, right? You have your Arcane Giants, which you probably have to play, but you don't necessarily. You have your 10 mana King guy from this expansion. You have your Azure Drakes, right? So it's like 5 bad hits, and then you have 2 Gadgetzans and a Rag, which just like win you the game a lot of the time. But yeah, it's a powerful card. Definitely seeing play in the Jade Idol deck. Will you play it as like a one-of to stop yourself from dying to fatigue in like Spell Druid? God, no. course not. That's a terrible idea. When's the last time you actually remember dying to fatigue as Druid? It happens like 1 in a million games. I've like never seen it. So I don't see. I mean, I have seen it, but it's rare. It's super rare. So even against Control Warrior, I don't see this seeing play outside of like a dedicated Jade Idol deck. That's where I think it's people are kind of overrating it. You're not going to play it more than that, but it is good in that deck, right? It's a core part of it. We got Celestial Dreamer is the next card. It's a 3-mana, 3/3 battlecry. If a friendly minion has 5 attack or more, gain +2/+2. So I did the math on this card, and I'm like, if it's a 3-mana 3/4, if it just had 1 more health, would I put it in my deck anyway? And I think the answer is almost always no. Like, it's so hard to fit cards in Druid right now because you have so many cards that are good. Like, the payoff for this is getting a 3-mana 5/5, which is not really like I auto win the game. You can't do it on curve. It's too situational. The payoff is too low, and the bar for making it into a deck, especially a Druid deck, is so stupidly high after this expansion. Like, your card has to do broken crap all the time to ever see play in your Druid deck because there's so many expansions at the same time, and every expansion is doing something degenerate. So your whole deck needs to be doing broken stuff now. And this card is not broken. It's just passable value, But yeah, I don't mind the design. It's kind of cool. Moving on, we got Vermin Sensei. Battlecry, give a friendly beast +2/+2. It's worse than Stranglethorn Tiger because it doesn't work with Menagerie Warden. It's worse than Druid of the Claw for the same reasons. Do you really want more than 4 or 5 drops to begin with? Probably not, but if you do, you probably just play Azure Drake and Curator. So I don't think this will see play ever. I think if it had like Pit Fighter stats to begin with, we could start talking, but this is just a incredibly weak Beast Druid card. It's like incredibly weak. This will never see play in my opinion. But maybe it could, like a full dedicated Beast deck, but even then you have to hit it on curve, and then it's only like okay then. I'm thoroughly underwhelmed. All right, moving on, we got Lunar Visions, which is a 5-mana draw too. So more Druid card draw, especially card draw that's spell-based, is so important because if it's spell-based, it's not going to mess up your Barns. It's going to reduce the cost on your Arcane Giants in more ways than one. It's going to work with Gadgetzan Auctioneer, which doesn't really apply to this card, but in general it could. It's going to enable combos with Malygos and Gadgetzan if you get either of those off of this thing. Lunar Visions is just a very inefficient card draw in a lot of ways, but it's also like an effect the deck kind of wants. Like, you kind of, at a certain point, because we have so many ramp spells available now, like, you just want more card draw. And I think the card that's going to do that is Gadgetzan Auctioneer, but maybe, just maybe, Lunar Visions somehow makes it in. I'm going to say it's unlikely, because you're only going to want this kind of card draw in a deck that's already almost all spell-based, so you're not going to be drawing minions too often. So yeah, I don't expect Lunar Visions to see much play for those reasons, but it's not like completely awful, right? Like, I can say the same thing every other set review will tell you, which is like, oh, if you hit 1 minion on average, it's like the same as Arcane Intellect, so you should have 15 minions for it. But realistically, man, build a Druid deck in your mind. It's all broken 2-ofs, right? 2 Living Roots, 2 Raven Idol, 2 Innervate, 2 Wild Growth, 2 Swipe, 2 Azure Drake, 2 Nourish. And you just go down the list, and then you pick an archetype, right? So, like, I want to be the Jade deck. So then you add 2 Jade Idol, 2 Jade Ramp Spell, Panda Skank, whatever her name is, the 6-mana 5/3 thing that makes more Jade Idol thing. You know what I mean? Like, Gadgetzan Barnes package, maybe Ragnaros. If you're like a edgy European pro player, you'll cut a card, add a Mulchin, and I'll name it something different. New archetype, PogChamp. It's just not much room for innovation is what I'm saying. So within Druid, that is. So because of that, cards really have to be stupid good to make the cut. Lunar Visions is not stupid good. It might be a role player, but that's about it. So moving on, we got Kuhn the Forgotten King, who is stupid good. He's Arcane Giant, but better. Mostly because of the armor option. It's easier to get to 10 mana than it is to play 12 spells. So any deck that plays Arcane Giant's already going to play this guy, either in addition or instead of one of them. The only thing I don't like about this card is it makes Barns worse, and I like stealing wins with a card that shouldn't be in the game. So, yeah, Kuhn the Forgotten King, just put it in your Druid deck, man. Unless it's like Beast Aggro Druid. Like, if you're playing Wild Growth, play this card. It's a mistake not to. It's very good, very flexible. I like it. Yeah, good card. Key thing here is it also refreshes your mana crystal. It doesn't add 10, so you can't like innervate it out and get like double value out of your innervate. That's a good way to balance it on their part, but yeah, still pretty broken. So I mean, that's it for Druid cards. Overall, might be the best class in the game. Might be better than Shaman now, but that's only if the Jade cards are broken, and I'm not sure if they are until I play with them. That's just something it's going to take time to figure out. So, moving on, we got Hunter. We got this card Alley Cat, which I don't remember them like spoiling outside of the last day where they just spoiled everything. At least I hadn't seen it before then, which is weird to me because it's like a class-defining card. Like Alley Cat is, you're just gonna play 2 of it in all your Hunter decks, and I think it's correct too. I'm like pretty sure it's correct too. It's a 1-mana 2/2, man. It's Living Roots, and you always get the dudes, and it's a beast. Like, this card is good. I know it's good. I don't know if it's auto-include good, but I'm pretty sure it's auto-include good. The only thing that might keep it down in this specific metagame is the fact that the Zoo decks nowadays are all 1/3 minions, so that kind of sucks. So against the Zoo, it's just the worst, but I mean, that matchup's always going to be bad for you. You don't have to keep it against the Zoo, and it's not even always bad. Sometimes they open on Flame Imp, and you can trade into that. Second thing is Priest is going to be a deck now. They added that class to the game, so that means Northshire Cleric. That means the 1-mana 2/2 gain 4 life guy. It's a lot of stuff that can test this. The 1-mana 2/2 guy is not a big deal, but Northshire Cleric is a big deal. So it's not as good because of how many 1/3s there are, but I mean, it's a 1-mana 2/2 with Beast. Like, you're desperate for playable 1-drops in Hunter right now. Anyway, you're like playing Secret Keeper garbage. It's like, have you played turn 1 Secret Keeper, turn 2 Kindly Grandmother, and then just like wondered where you went wrong in life? That's how I feel when I play Hunter. So, yeah, it's a good 1-drop. You should play it. Moving on, we got Smuggler's Crate. So when you first evaluate this card and you try to compare it to something like Mark of the Wild, you actually think it's kind of like mediocre because you're not getting the 2 damage attack immediately. You're only saving 1 mana, all this stuff. But Hunter doesn't have that many good 1-mana plays. You can play Alley Cat and you can play Fiery Bat, but do you really want that many like low-impact 1-drops? So there's room, right, for a 1-mana card in Hunter. Second thing is, it synergizes like stupid well with all the other Hunter cards in this set. Not all of them, but the ones that have like a lot of upside and a lot of payoff for having a lot of attack. So the Dispatch Kodo that I'll talk about later and Rat Pack, both of which are going to be absolutely core in the Hunter deck, right? With both of those cards, this has such insane synergy that it's too good not to run. There's a core 2 of, you're playing it with your Rat Packs, you're playing it with your Kodo. It's just too good. You're going to play it. It's nuts. So, but only because it synergizes with those cards, right? So, do expect it to see a ton of play. And yeah, let's move on. We got Shaky Zip Gunner, which is a 3-mana 3/3. Give Death Rattle, give random minion in your hand, +2/+2. It has really good synergy with the 2 cards I just mentioned, right? I mean, there's a lot of cards in Hunter that have synergy, if you buff their attack. But is that worth playing like a vanilla 3/3 for 3 in your deck? That's really the question. The thing about Hunter is it's already very clogged at the 3-mana slot. You're going to want to play Kill Command because you want to skillfully earn your wins. So it's not really a 3-drop, but it's something you play on turn 3 sometimes. More importantly, though, you have Animal Companion and you have Eaglehorn Bow. And then if you're trying to play Cat Trick, you also have Cloaked Huntress, right? So it's a lot of 3-mana cards to begin with. I don't know if Shaky Zip Gunner really makes the cut because of that. But it is like 5/5 of stats, technically. It's not a card to sneeze at. it's kind of interesting to point out that Smuggler's Crate, for example, only will buff a beast in your hand, which is actually good, right? If I have like Zip Gunner, who's not a beast, and then I have my Kodo that I actually want to buff, the Kodo's the one getting the buff. But with Shaky Zip Gunner, if I have like more random non-beast crap in my hand, I might buff the wrong minion sometimes. So overall, the power level is there for it to be playable. Will it make the cut over other 3-drops? I can't say for sure. I think yes, actually. I think it's good enough, but it's super close. It's super close. Moving on, we got Hidden Cache, which is a secret. After your opponent plays a minion, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. This card's garbage. I'm not going to waste time talking about it. Moving on with my life. Shrog Beast Rager, 2 mana, 3/2. Give a random beast in your hand +1/+1. This one also has the beast condition. Huge Toad is actually a very good card. And Kindly Grandmother is a very good card. And Quick Shot's a very good card. There's a lot of good 2 mana options for Hunter already. Cantric's a solid 2 mana play. Will Shrog Beast Rager be good enough to run in a Hunter deck? I think yes. And that's because the 3 mana slot is the one that's going to get clogged more than anything, because you're going to have Rat Pack in your deck, and you need to play this card if you want your Rat Pack to be good. I'll explain what Rat Pack is in just a minute. And you also have your 4 mana Dispatch Kodo that this also synergizes with. So I think this will be Khorne in Hunter decks, just because I think that the 4-drop and the 3-drop that I'm about to talk about, the Kodo and the Rat, are both too... they're both too strong not to build your deck around. So, yeah. Because of those cards, you're going to play 2 of this just as a role player card. Moving on, we got Dispatch Kodo. One of the 2 reasons to play all this hand buffing crap. It is a 4 mana 2/4. Battlecry, deal damage equal to this minion's attack. So, if you played one of your... what's it called? Smuggler's Crate, the 1 mana +2/+2 on turn 1. Right, you're getting a 4/6 on curve that deals 4 damage coming in, and oh, by the way, it can also go face for some reason. Yeah, that's a Hearthstone card. I mean, that's the Hunter deck now, right? You play Kodo, you play Rat Pack. To be fair, the Cloaked Huntress list required some degree of thought. And foresight and understanding of mulligans and whether you have coin or not and matchups. This deck doesn't require any of those things. With the new Hunter build, you mulligan away the cards that cost 4 or more, because you probably can't count that high, and then you play the most expensive card in your hand every single turn that you can, and then your opponent dies, maybe, probably. And that's kind of how the deck's going to play out. Hopefully it's the only deck in the game that plays this way. It's going to be so brain dead. All you're doing is playing vanilla minions on curve and hope that you draw them in the right order and that the opponent dies. But cards are good enough that it looks like it'll work a lot of the time. So we'll see how that works out, man. We'll see. And then we got Rat Pack, which is the 3 mana payoff for playing all the hand buff cards. This is one of the reasons that the Zip Gunner guy might not see play, even though the hand buffs are so important in the deck. Just because you have so many 3-drops, because you're going to play 2 of this guy as well. Just like Kodo, he's the other card that pays you off for buffing stuff in your hand. Yeah, just good stats on a beast. When it dies, you summon a bunch of 1/1 beasts. It's going to have some interesting... If you're the Druid playing against the Hunter, you're going to have some interesting decisions about trying to set up a way to trade into it and then swipe. It's going to be very important to protect your Rat Pack. You're not going to want to let them pop it on their turn. You're going to want to make sure that you get to attack with your 1/1s. And yeah, all in all, really powerful card. We'll see play. This is the new face of Hunter. Moving on, we got Piranha Launcher. After your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 Piranha. Piranhas are beasts. Just 1 mana, 1/1 vanilla beasts. It's just too slow. It's just too slow. I'd rather play a 3-drop and a hero power. It's not high impact enough for Hunter to play this card, because you're going to have other options. at 5 mana, such as Knuckles, who I think is also an auto-include. This is like your 5th copy of a hand buff card. So Knuckles is really big. You play 5 mana, and then when you attack, Harambe gets his revenge. Yeah, it's a pretty good card. I mean, the numbers are big, and the mana cost number is not very big. Yep. Not much to say about it. Like, the stats are good enough to put it in your deck, so you will put it in your deck, and then you will play it when you have 5 mana, and then you will attack with it and win the game. So, yeah. Not much to really say about that, right? Like, I can't really talk about strategy with this. This deck builds itself, plays itself, and then it's just very draw dependent and matchup dependent on whether it wins or not. Knuckles is good though. All right, moving on to Mage. Class with spells and stuff. I like spells. Wait, did Hunter get a single spell this expansion? I got a secret and a smuggler's crate. All right. Right, so Mage. First of all, we got Freezing Potion. They needed a way to nerf all of the potion-giving cards by throwing in some hot garbage, or cold garbage in this case. It's 0 mana, freeze an enemy. It's not the worst if you get it off of, one of your potion generator cards, like the 4 mana 3/3. I think it's too low value to see play in aggressive lists. Same reason they don't play Ice Lance, and I've been trying to play Ice Lance and Tempo Mage since beta. It just doesn't work. You can't afford to lose the value, and you have to use Frostbolt as removal early a lot of times. You very rarely get your burst damage out of it that you'd think you might. Freezing Potion overall, just because it's so low value, probably just doesn't make the cut. Because like I said, for every single deck, a card has to 100% do something broken to be in your deck in the first place. Or it has to enable a different broken card in your deck. Like, the bar for making it into your list to be competitive now in Standard is super high. There's just so many cards from so many expansions that cards like Freezing Potion just aren't good enough. But they will see play because there's lots of cards that add potions to your hand. Anyway, moving on, we got Cabal Lackey, which is one of my favorite Mage cards in the set. This is how you do it. There are 2 Mage cards in this expansion that really push the aggressive Secrets archetype, which is in turn going to add 2 new cards to Mage as well. Mage got more cards in this set than any other class because you also got Kirin Mage, which was up until this point unplayable. I made it good in Flood Mage once, but that's about it. So Kirin is also in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, Kirin Mage, and so is Ethereal Arcanist. All of these cards are in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, which is sweet. Again, the deck also builds itself, but it's, I think, more powerful than traditional Tempo Mage. It's very close, but I think between this card, Medivh's Valet, the Thing from Below on Secrets, it's just too many... It feels like too many broken turns can happen with this kind of deck to not play it, so I expect Secret Tempo Mage or Secret Aggro Mage to actually be a real deck moving forward. So this card will be a core part of that. Expect to see a lot of it. Alright, we got Cryomancer next. 5 mana 5/5, Battlecry, gain +2/+2 if an enemy is frozen. So if this card was a 5 mana 7/7 all of the time, I would still not put it in my deck on purpose. Yeah. It's playable in Arena. I mean, it's got the Clockwork Knight stats. You'll run it. But yeah, overall, nothing special. Pretty standard card. Cool art. All right, we got Potion of Polymorph. After your opponent plays a minion, transform it into a 1/1 sheep. I don't like the design on this card because I think that every time they release a secret, it should have a different condition. For example, when Cat Trick got released, it was the first Hunter secret that punished the opponent for playing spells, which is why it was so interesting, because the second it was introduced into the metagame, it made people play differently against Hunter. It actually added, secrets are one of the only ways to add counterplay in Hearthstone. So, right now when you play against Mage, especially in a more aggressive tempo-based Mage, you're already testing for Mirror Entity, you're already playing your little stuff first anyway, So it doesn't actually change the way you play at all. You play around it the same way you play around Mirror Entity. So it's not actually changing the way the game is played from either side. It's not introducing counterplay to the game that didn't exist before. I don't think it'll see much play because honestly, Mirror Entity is just a better card, and I think this is. I mean, okay, maybe it'll see play. Let me get this clear. When you're playing like the new Tempo Mage deck with secrets, you're playing a lot of secrets because your cards require you to have a lot of secrets. You have the 1-mana guy, you have Kirin Tor Mage. You actually want secrets in your hand. Medivh's Valet. So maybe you're playing so many, and you're not going to play crap like Ice Barrier or Ice Block, unless Hunter gets really popular and you want life gain or something. But you're going to play generally like tempo-favorable secrets like Counterspell and Mirror Entity. Maybe you just need so many more secrets that this makes the cut anyway. But I don't like that you play around it the same way as like the most common aggro secret already. In a control deck, I probably wouldn't play this in general, but yeah, it seems like they still get the battle cry too, so I don't know. But yeah, it might be playable, but only because we need so many secrets now. Moving on, we got Volcanic Potion, deal 2 damage to all minions. This is kind of a cool card actually. The power of spell power minions has kind of been discovered lately. You're starting to see like Frigid Snowbolt at high legend ranks. You're starting to see Evolved Kobold in multiple classes, Rogue, Mage, and Druid. So because of the increase in the amount of spell power being played, you're starting to see more Arcane Explosion being played as well. This card with a spell power deck is worse than Arcane Explosion, but in a Reno deck, you do play it. It's just core, right? If you're playing a defensive, control-y mage deck, which will be an archetype thanks to the cards in this set, you're definitely going to put Volcanic Potion in it. Same reason you're going to play Demon Wrath in Warlock, or like in Reno Lock. It's a good card. But outside of the Reno decks, I don't expect to see it too much. And it's like a Tempo Mage deck, there'd have to be a lot of tokens in the metagame, and you would have to play Arcane Explosion before this card anyway, so yeah. Moving on, we got Cabal Crystal Runner. The Blizzard solution to things being unplayable. All of their expansions upon expansions of Totem cards didn't see play. There was no Draenei Totem Carver. Totemic Might wasn't seeing play. Primal Fusion didn't see play. But then they decided to make Thing from Below. And then Totem saw a little bit of play. They still see a little bit of play today. So, the Blizzard solution to Secret Aggro Mage, right? Ethereal Arcanist isn't seeing play. Kirin Tor Mage isn't seeing play. What do? We play Thing from Below in our Mage deck. It's a good card. You will put it in your deck. It will attack for 5. Thank God it doesn't have Taunt. But yeah, along with the 1-drop, this is one of the cards that's going to enable the aggressive Tempo Mage secret deck. Moving on, we got Manic Soulcaster. Battlecry, choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy into your deck. You might play this just for the stats in like a Reno deck or something. It's going to help in fatigue matchups, of course. Being able to like play 2 Renos throughout the course of a game could matter sometimes. In like Fatigue Mage, maybe it does some stuff, even if it's not as good as Duplicate. It's an interesting card. Like, it's rare that you're going to want to spend 3 mana just for like a Spider Tank in a Mage deck when you have so many other good options on turn 3. Right, the slow lists are going to want Acolyte of Pain a lot of times, or like to play Arcane Intellect. The aggressive lists are going to want to play Flamewaker or Arcane Intellect or Kirin Tor Mage. So Manic Soulcaster, there isn't like a clear home for this guy. I don't think Fatigue Mage is really going to be a thing because there's so many good ways to get around it now. The old gods make it really hard to fatigue you. Jade Idol's in the game now, so it's really hard to fatigue Druid if that's popular. So overall, I don't expect it to see too much play, but it's a very interesting card, and it's costed in a way where it's playable. Moving on, we have a card that I'm surprised there's been so little discussion about this card. This card worries me so much. Greater Arcane Missiles. Whew. I am surprised that they made this card. I'm going to tell you guys a story about the most broken metagame in the history of Hearthstone. There were 2 cards in the game way back in early beta that mattered. Number 1 was Blood Imp, which used to do something very different. It was the best card in the game by a mile. There was nothing even comparable, no tools in the game to deal with it. Blood Imp was the best card in the game. The second best card in the game was Pyroblast, and it's because Pyroblast cost 8 mana. And the only 2 playable decks were Zoo and Pyroblast Mage, whatever list, you played 2 of it in Freeze Mage, you played 2 of it in Aggro Mage, and it was basically like a 1-card Druid combo. Like if you guys remember Force of Nature Savage Roar, basically you deal some face damage, then you play this thing and they die, right? So, Greater Arcane Missiles, compared to an 8 mana deal 10, this is a 7 mana deal 9 on an empty board, and that's if they have no board, right, and you have no spell power. So that alone is like a good card to play in a winning position or at a stalemate position. And then let's think about the scenario where you're behind on board to multiple minions. Pyroblast is good in that scenario too at 8 mana because you can cheese the game by just killing them and going face. But this is also good. It's like, how do I describe this? It's like a Flame Strike that's not dead in control matchups. You're going to have this random crap like Babbling Book in your deck to like help trade off so that the 3 damage missiles deal like the perfect amount to stuff. You're maximizing damage. You get to play 2 of this card. 2 of it. Like, it works with spell power. Why does it work with spell power? I don't know. Azure Drake lives for a turn, take 12. Like, Blood Mage on turn 9, take 12. It just seems nuts to me. Like, it's better than Fireland's Portal, in my opinion. It's better than Flame Strike, in my opinion. It's good when you're behind. It's even better when you're ahead. I think it's nuts. It does have some amount of counterplay for what it's worth. 7 mana cards are generally easier to play around than cheap ones. So maybe you can try to line up your stats so you have some 4 health minions. Maybe you get blown out by a random Flame Strike then. I don't know. But I'm playing 2 of this in all my aggressive mage decks. The card seems stupid good to me. So I'm just going to play 2 of it. And I don't want to say it was a mistake, but it's like, I guess I'm glad they just printed like a good spell for the first time in a while, but it's like a really good spell. I mean, it's like a game-defining spell, right? It's like I play this and it wins me the game on its own, and they haven't made a spell that powerful in a very long time. So I'm surprised this card doesn't have more discussion around it. I think it's nuts. Yeah, I mean, maybe you play this in Freeze Mage too. Like, I don't know. You have so many different places you can put this. Like, mostly Tempo Mage though is where it's at its best. But yeah, it's good. It's nuts. Moving on, we have Inkmaster Solia, which is the Mage Legendary for the Reno deck. If your deck has no duplicates, the next spell you cast this turn costs 0. I look forward to playing 0 mana Greater Arcane Missiles off of this card and getting a 5/5 for reasons. It's good. You'll play it in the Reno deck. It's not insane. I mean, like, best case scenario, if I'm playing it on curve at exactly 7 mana, I'm wasting none of my mana. I play a 7 mana cost spell off of this, like Greater Arcane Missiles. I'm essentially getting a 0 mana 5/5. It's the same as having cast your Greater Arcane Missiles and then playing your 0 mana 5/5. Like, it's good, yeah, but there's a scenario where you draw this and you have 8 mana, and then all of a sudden that's like not as good a value, or you're playing like a Fireball off of it, and then it's like 7 mana and 2 cards to do a Fireball plus a 5/5. Like, it's there's a real possibility it's not good enough. As unlikely as that is, like, even for Reno Mage, it's possible you just play other stuff. But I think it's good enough. You want more cards that help you with tempo, but this is the card's going to take a lot of playing with. I feel like, everyone's going to start by including it in their Reno Mage, but I wouldn't be surprised if it just ends up not making the cut. So, yeah, it just doesn't seem like insanely powerful to me, but it's playable, I think. Moving on, we got... Oh, but, yep, sorry, by the way. Reno. Reno's actually going to be a massive new archetype in this expansion. Now, Reno Mage is actually going to be a thing, I think. We're actually going to have Reno Warlock be, like, competitively viable. It's going to actually be able to deal with Shaman and Zoo, potentially, which it hasn't been able to do before. It's an exciting time, you know. Reno Priest, an actual thing. There's not enough playable Priest cards before this expansion to make a deck playing 2 of everything, so to make a deck playing 1 of everything is ambitious, but I'm excited to see how that works out. But yeah, overall, I'm excited to play some Reno decks, you know. There's just so many new archetypes coming out of this expansion, and I'm excited for that. Moving forward, we got Grimscale Chum. Give a random Murloc in your hand +1/+1. You will auto-include this card in the Murloc aggro deck. You won't play it in the slow Murloc decks. If the Murloc aggro deck sees a ton of play, this card will see a ton of play. If the aggro Murloc deck does not see much play, this card will not see much play. Pretty straightforward. It's interesting that you have like so many 1-mana Murlocs in Paladin now. I actually think this might be enough to push Murloc aggro over the top. Because you're like, the deck is really not bad right now. You're so close. You're so close to having a good list right now. This really does push it over the top, though, I think. Like, it really gives you one more strong turn 1 play. So the deck is basically all minions and 2 Divine Favor. And it wins a lot of games. I've actually played a lot of Standard with it before the expansion, and it's actually been fine. So yeah, we'll see. But, you know, as usual, it's better to bet against Murlocs than it is to bet for them. So not expecting much, but maybe. To be fair, Paladin looks like just the worst class in the game after this expansion, so I would not be surprised if the only playable version is just aggro Paladin, you know. Alright, moving on. We got Smuggler's Run. Give all minions in your hand +1/+1. So to get maximum value out of this card, you're going to want a lot of minions in your hand. If you're playing a lot of minions in your hand, you're probably an aggro deck, right? The control Paladin decks are going to have a lot of spells and weapons and stuff. So if you're an aggro Paladin deck, that's the only way you have a lot of minions in your hand, except you're not going to have a lot of minions in your hand because you're going to play your hand out very quickly. So because of these factors, it's just a card that like inherently doesn't synergize with itself. Like the way to maximize its value like inherently makes it a weak archetype for this kind of effect. So I expect this to not see much play at all. I think it's a pretty weak card. Maybe someone will surprise me. I don't know, but I'm really not expecting much from this. So yeah, I got Grime Street Outfitter. Give all minions in your hand +1/+1. If you buff at least 2 minions, it's kind of worth it. It's a tough card to evaluate. You know, Paladin really wanted a 2-drop in this expansion, and this is a playable 2-drop in aggressive lists. It's okay, but not insane. I would not be surprised if just like Flame Juggler is a better card. So, you know, I'm not 100% sold on this. It's not, again, you know, not unplayable, but I don't expect too much out of Grime Street Outfitter. Moving forward, we got Getaway Kodo. When a friendly minion dies, return it to your hands. Actually a very powerful secret. I don't know if this is enough to push Secret Paladin over the top. It's awkward with Noble Sacrifice, obviously, because you don't want to return your 2/1 to your hand. But outside of that, it's a pretty powerful secret. Being able to get Battle Cries a second time, it's just set up with a big minion. It's actually pretty strong. So, Getaway Kodo, I feel like the power level is there for it to see play. The question is, will there be a deck that it makes sense to play secrets in Paladin? And in Standard, at least, I'm skeptical. But we still have Mysterious Challenger for a little bit, so you never know. I did play Challengers and Secrets in my Murloc aggro Pally when I streamed it. Whether there's still room for that with the new expansion, it's left to be seen. We'll find out. But yeah, the power level's there for it to be playable. I just don't think there's a deck for it in Standard, at least. Grime Street Enforcer says, at the end of your turn, give all minions in your hand +4/+1/+1. It's a 5-mana 4/4. I think it's just too weak. Like, just too many broken things you can be doing for 5 mana. Why play a dude that just has weak stats and then he tries to make up for it by giving you some more stats in a slow way? Like, it's too slow, too weak to see play, in my opinion. There's better 5-drops to be playing. I would rather be playing Leroy on curve and hitting my opponent in the face. That's me personally. So, yeah, I don't expect too much out of Grime Street Enforcer. I think I'm just going to move on. Sorry, I didn't get much sleep. Grime Street Protector. Back to Boom. 7 mana, 6/6 taunt. Battlecry, give adjacent minions Divine Shield. I guess in like a mid-rangey Paladin deck, you can play an effect like this. It's kind of interesting that way. It's I mean, it's really not a bad card. The Divine Shield is a lot more value than the taunt. But you really want, like, Divine Shield's value scales on how big the minion that you give Divine Shield to is. So if the minion has a lot of attack, that Divine Shield is super valuable. But if the minion has like 1 attack, then, you know, the Divine Shield's not really relevant. So, you know, in an aggressive deck, this card just isn't aggressive enough to make the cut. In a defensive deck, in order to get full value out of it, you already need to have 2 minions on board beforehand, which is a pretty tall order for a defensive deck, you know. All that said, though, and maybe like an Azathi type of list, this can see play. There aren't very many good options for 7-mana cards in slower Paladin decks, so there's a chance that Grime Street Protector sees play down the line. You never know. But right now, there's no real archetype for it. Moving on, we got Mean Street Marshal, Death Rattle. If this minion has 2 or more attack, draw a card. Yeah, this card's strong. Like, 1-drops are just so powerful, and the fact that this is such a good buff target, I think like that alone will make it see play. You're going to be playing buffs in your aggressive Paladin deck most of the time. You know, Abusive Sergeant did get nerfed, but there's still plenty of other good options, and you can still play Abusive. It works with Direwolf Alpha. It just works with so many things that it synergizes well with. Randomly, if you play Crazed Alchemist for opposing Doomsayers, it works with that. Just a million cards, right? On top of like the standard hand buffs and everything. Although I don't see a hand buff that I really want to be playing. Maybe the 2-drop. All in all, though, playable card. It's strong, and I think that you know, in aggressive Paladin decks, at the very least in Wild, you'll be playing this. So moving on, we got Small Time Recruits. 3 mana, draw 3 1-cost minions from your deck. I mean, overall, you're paying 6 mana to develop 3 1/1s, right? So in an aggressive list, that's not good. But this kind of effect sees play down the line in ways people don't expect. So there might be a point when you're trying to combo a 1-mana card in Standard for some kind of OTK or just for some kind of synergy. Maybe like a control deck that's randomly playing some kind of like 1-drop to combo something. This happens in Magic a lot when a card like this gets printed and then there's no immediate application for it, but then later down the line, a couple expansions later, there's just a card that's printed, and this is used as like a tutor effect to go find your 1-drop that's important. So in that kind of scenario, this would see play, I think. But just in like an aggressive Paladin deck, and you're not going to play. You're going to play Divine Favor instead. You're going to play weapons instead. They're just going to be better. So yeah. Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. Divine Shield Taunt. Damage dealt by this minion also heals your hero. To play this card in an aggressive deck makes the life gain not really matter. Like, it's actually worse than Silver Hand Knight in an aggressive deck. You don't really care about gaining life in aggressive lists unless you're like in a racing situation against Hunter. Even that matchup is just going to come down to board control. So this is really more for defensive decks, I feel like. It's just like a guy to play like in the early game to kind of stay alive against aggro. It's possible that mid-range Paladin becomes a thing. The 7-mana guy, Wicker Flame, the standard Blessing of Kings, Keeper of Uldamon stuff, like these are all reasons to be playing kind of a mid-rangey Paladin list, and it's possible we see more of that moving forward, but you're not going to play this in aggro, like I said, because you don't care about the life gain. So then you have to compare it to, like, Silverhand Knight. You'd rather have Silverhand Knight because he guarantees the buff. So, yeah, I think it pretty much leaves it for mid-range or slower decks, which don't tend to play as many buffs. But it's not unplayable in those decks. I don't think it's going to make its own archetype. It's like a card that I would play in the Pants Paladin deck, but it's not going to like make or break anything really, any archetypes like that. So yeah, that's pretty much Paladin in a nutshell. I mean, I think Paladin's going to be the weakest class in the game after this set is released, which is sad for Paladin, but whatever. It had its time in the spotlight with Secret Pally. Moving on, though, we got Potion of Madness with Priest. This is a card that, similar to Shadow Madness, gain control of an enemy minion, 2 or less attack until end of turn. Normally, I would say you wouldn't play more than one of this, if any. If it ever gets popular, it's very easy to play around in a lot of cases. It's very specific, like which matchups it's good in. But with all that said, there is now a card in Hearthstone that enables all of your effects relying on low attack minions that maybe this sees play. Maybe. I could see playing one of it because Reno Priest, like I mentioned, is going to be a thing. They're pushing the Reno archetype with the Cabal. And, in that deck, I see Potion of Madness having some potential, but I don't expect to play more than one of it. And even then, I would expect it to be fairly uncommon. But yeah. Moving on, we got Cabal Talon Priest. Battlecry, give a friendly minion +3 health. Just like a strong 3-drop. Priest didn't really need more 3-drops, but like you'll take it. It's if the buff happens, it's going to be super late game on a different minion. But it is like a good Hearthstone card, right? You're going to play it in your Priest deck. Turn 1, you're going to play Northshire Cleric. Turn 2, you're going to hero power yourself and complain. Turn 3, you're going to play Talon Priest. And then through curving out, like through some kind of swing turn with the, like a 2-card combo with the attack reduction card, you're going to swing the board state back, and then you're going to get value and grind them out. So Talon Priest we'll see play, definitely as a 1 of, at least in the Reno decks. As a 2 of, quite probably in most Priest decks. It is good. There's not much to say about it besides that. Like, it's a good card. Oh, and Dragon Priest, it's actually very strong. So, yeah. Moving on, we got Cabal Songstealer. It says Battlecry, silence a minion. Those are pretty good stats for a silence minion, but they're not like that much better than Spellbreaker. And at least while we still have Entomb, you don't need a silence effect in your Priest deck. You could play like 1 copy of this in Reno, but even in that deck, I don't know if there's enough slots that this makes the cut. So yeah, Cabal Songstealer I think won't see play while Entomb is in the metagame, but after Entomb leaves, we might see this card get played as an answer to Sylvanas, which is a card that traditionally Priest is very, very weak to, before they made Entomb. So moving on, Pint-Sized Potion. This is the most interesting Priest card in the expansion. And when I say interesting, I mean broken. And not like the 5-mana dragon card broken that I'm going to talk about later. It's like broken in that this is the kind of effect that I've always wondered, like, how good would Priest be if they had a card that did this. And then they printed the card, and then it cost 1 mana, and it reduced 3 attack. So I don't know what they were thinking. It's a 1-mana card that combos with everything. Priest is just going to be built around 2-card combo swing turns, basically, unless you're playing Dragon Curve Out Priest. And yeah, like in that deck, you play 2 of this. It's your best card in that deck. It's like Akanai Circle, except it's like, imagine if Akanai comboed with every spell in your deck. It's powerful. It's a good card. Helps for trading too. It's just strong. Like, you'll play 2 of it, period, unless you're playing Dragon. And even then, you might hybridize potion combos into your Dragon deck. Probably not, but maybe. Yeah, this card's very strong. I don't know if it's healthy for the game that it exists, but it will certainly make Priest the deck. Yeah, Potion wins games. That's all there is to it, really. It'll also make Shadow Word Horror a stronger card than it was before, too, which is kind of cool. Moving on, we got Greater Healing Potion, restore 12 health to a friendly character. I don't really know when you would want this kind of effect. I guess if you want to play Reno, but you also want to play 2 copies of Priest cards instead of 1, this is like Reno, basically. It's a strong heal effect, you know. As a 1 of, I can see this having a lot of potential impact in, you know, the more aggressive matchups. You're guaranteeing that 12 health. It's a very big deal. Will it see play a lot, though? No, it's not going to be like a common card, but it'll be a role player card in certain builds of Priest in certain metagames. Moving on, we got Draconid Operative, which is like standard Blizzard power creep, like Menagerie Warden. Like they want X deck to be a thing, so they make a card with too many stats for too little mana. And you have this. It's Pit Fighter, and it draws a card. And it's better than drawing a card. It discovers a card, and it doesn't just discover a card, but it discovers from your opponent's deck, so you also get information about what's still in their deck. You get so much information about like which 3 cards they still have that like also lets you play around stuff or choose not to play around certain things. Yeah, it's a like obvious 2 of in every Dragon Priest deck. Like no matter what, you will of course play it. It might be strong enough that you just play a small Dragon package even in the Control Priest decks. But yeah, overall, I think this probably pushes Azur's Drake out of the Priest deck. Card is already questionable to begin with because you don't play that many spells that gain benefit off the spell power. But this card is just like more stats and a better draw effect, and it's still a dragon. So as long as you compensate your dragon count for playing Draconid Operative, it's a pretty strong card, and I expect it to be a standard 2 of in every Dragon Priest deck. Mana Geode, I think, is overrated garbage. I think that there are the only Priest deck that cares about like curving out is Dragon, and this card isn't good enough for Dragon. I don't think this card's good enough for any build of Priest. I think like Flame Juggler's better. You only get the 2/2 if you heal it, not other minions. Getting a 2/2 does not mean you win the game. Spending mana to hero power your 2/3 is going to be worse than just playing a minion on curve a lot of times anyway. It's just too little value for too much work. It's River Crocolisk. The scenarios where this actually does stuff for you and it's worth committing mana to healing it and you somehow manage to damage it without killing it, it's just the payoff's not worth the work. And like, keep in mind the amount of counterplay with this, right? The fact that it needs to be healed means your opponent's not going to play into it, right? They're going to outright kill it. They're going to play big minions. They're not going to play a 2/2 onto the board for you to just trade into and get your value. So I don't think this will see play in the control decks. I don't think it'll see play in the curve out Priest decks. I don't think it'll see play at all. I'd rather play Fairy Dragon in a Dragon deck. I'd rather play anything else in control. Doomsayer, Pyromancer, whatever. So, yeah. This card had so many upvotes because it was a 2-mana Priest card. People were so desperate for one. And Blizzard managed to print one without actually printing one. This card actually just sucks. Alright, moving on, we got Dragonfire Potion. 5 damage to all minions except dragons. It's good. I mean, you know, in the dragon deck, obviously, that is a stupidly powerful effect, especially when you're following up a 5-mana 5/6 with this. It's gross. Dragonfire Potion's strong. I mean, you'll play it in every list of Priest, I think. Even the control decks, you'll run it at least as a 1 of. The Reno decks, you'll definitely run it as a 1 of. In the Dragon decks, you probably run it as a 2 of. It's a hell of a card. Now, how susceptible the metagame becomes to Dragonfire Potion, that's a different question. There's a chance that other Dragon decks become better against Dragon Priest because Dragonfire Potion doesn't affect their stuff as much. But yeah, overall, I think, card is excellent. You'll see it played in multiple Priest archetypes. It's no Light Bomb, but it is better in Dragon Priest than Light Bomb, and it's just a hell of a card. It's very powerful. All right. Moving on, we got Raza the Chained. If your deck has no duplicates, your hero power costs 0 this game. So unlike the Mage duplicates card, this one's like actually good when you get it off. That's a super powerful ability. To be able to hero power for 0 mana every turn for the rest of the game is actually disgusting. Like, if the game lasts 4 more turns, which it will because you're playing this on turn 5 and hero powering immediately, like every turn it lives is 2 extra health. It's not just 2 extra health, but it's like 2 extra health on a minion sometimes. It's so sick. Like, when you trigger this card, you're changing your hero power in a way that helps you prolong the game. And on top of that, the more you prolong the game, the more value this card gave you. Because every extra turn that the game lasts, that's another free roll hero power you got. So it's just like, it's a card that feeds itself value-wise. Like, the one way that it gets value feeds the other way that it gets value. Like, stops you from dying, I guess. It's not really value, but it's like, a core functionality. It's important. And then on top of that, the longer it's stopping you from dying, the better it's getting. You're just pulling further and further out of range. This 5-drop's giving you more value. It's ridiculous. It's one of the strongest. I mean, this is probably better than Reno. If I had the choice between playing Reno Jackson or this card in Reno Priest, I would definitely rather play this card. Granted, Priest has other healing effects. Like Warlock would probably rather have Reno Jackson, but the card's good. Card's good. It's a big reason to play Reno Priest. It's the reason to play Reno Priest. I expect big things out of this card. So, yeah. Anyway, Priest looks to be in a much better spot. Dragon Priest is definitely a good deck, and I'm sure some variant of Control Priest would be good because of Pint-Sized Potion. There's a chance I'm undervaluing Potion of Madness, but for people that want to contradict what I said about it, they're just going to link the timestamp of me talking about the card and then not hear this whole part of it, so it's a moot point. Yeah, alright, moving on. We got Rogue next. So Jade Shuriken, deal 2 damage, combo, summon a Jade Golem. I like it. 2 mana, deal 2 damage, can go face. That's a big deal. It changes the range that you have on your deck. I don't, like, obviously, okay, if you're playing the Jade Golem deck, you're going to play Jade Shurikens. They're going to be a core part of it. The question is, can you play this card in a rogue deck with just, like, minimalist, or, like, minimal, Jade Golem synergies? And I think the answer is no. I think you have to be, like, kind of set on the Jade Golem plan in order to be running this. But in that deck, it's very good. It's another early game removal spell. You don't feel the absolute worst playing it on turn 2 and just, like, killing a Knife Juggler or Dark Peddler with it. Depending on what your curve looks like. It's just a very powerful card. And, yeah, I expect big things out of Jade Rogue. Looks pretty strong. Jade Swarmer. 2 mana, 1/1 stealth, death rattle, summon a Jade Golem. This card's great. Stealth, death rattle, just seems like they literally designed it to force Unearthed Raptor to see play. Unearthed Raptor is a card that's like so stupidly powerful that just was never played as much as it should be. So they're just like, screw it. We're printing like a 2 mana stealth with a good death rattle, and then if the death rattle goes off twice, it gets better the second time. That's what this card is. It's the Unearthed Raptor enabler. Even just outside of that, it's a good card. I mean, between this and Hero Power, it's just stealth gives you so much control about how you trade in the early game, and it's just a good card, just a good Hearthstone card. Not much to say about this. Like, Jade Rogue definitely looking strong. Next we got Shadow Razor, which is a 3 mana 5/1 stealth. I want to meme and make jokes about this card, but it's not like, no, it's pretty garbage. I mean, there's Jungle Panther, which I've played in Tempo Rogue before, but Jungle Panther's better than this, I think. Doesn't die to swipe or juggles or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's bad, but anything with the word Razor in it is going to be pretty bad, right? Alright, moving on, we got Counterfeit Coin. Gain a mana crystal this turn only. This is one of the most set-defining cards, I think. When this card was first spoiled, I was reading Reddit, and a bunch of players that think they understand the game were calling it out as like garbage and overrated, and even though most people were saying it's bad, nobody was overrating it. People are not hyped about counterfeit coin, and I don't understand. I think I don't understand why they're not hyped about this, just like they don't understand the game of Hearthstone. This card is disgusting. This card changes the way so many matchups play out. The fact that I can play like a turn 2 SI agent going first against Zoo is like the difference between an abysmal matchup that's 80-20 in their favor and me just winning the game. Like, drawing it late game in my Gadgetzan deck, also obviously insane. I don't know what to say about it, man. There's a card called Lotus Petal in Magic, which is what I used to call coin in this game when I started. Same thing, 0 mana, add a mana to your pool, it's coin. Lotus Petal sees play in every single restricted format to this day. It saw play back in Standard, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I didn't play back like 20 years ago. But this kind of effect is broken. It's breaking a fundamental rule of the game of Hearthstone, which is how much mana should I have this turn. Hearthstone is a game where you do not draw lands. Every card you draw out of your deck is something you can play. There are no bricks. So the fact that I'm drawing gas every single turn means that a card in the game that I can draw that's just mana, like, first of all, it makes it harder to flood out. Like, you're not going to run out of stuff to play as easy in a game like Hearthstone. You're always going to draw a playable card. Second of all, it means there's cards in my deck I can draw that actually change the way my deck plays. Imagine a scenario where Blizzard announced a patch and they said, we're reverting the Gadgetzan Auctioneer nerf. Gadgetzan Auctioneer now costs 5 mana instead of 6. Everyone would be going insane, right? They'd be like, oh, Gadgetzan's broken again. Every game you draw counterfeit coin, it's stronger than a 5 mana Gadgetzan. You can make it a 5 mana Gadgetzan by playing your coin, but you can also make it a 5 mana Gadgetzan that draws you an additional card for no reason. Counterfeit coin is like a game-defining card. The fact that people are comparing it to Innervate, the most broken fucking card in the game, and saying that it's bad because it's worse than Innervate, do not understand the game. Every single time sets come out, man, I get so triggered by people's reasoning for why cards are bad. You know? It's like, I don't know how to describe it, man. It's like a card comes out that has a similar effect to an existing card, and people are like, well, that card's unplayable because this card already exists. Like, people were saying that like the Shaman cards were bad because they're worse than like a 0 mana 5/5 taunt. Or like, I wish I had like a better example for you guys. Like, God. I don't know how to describe it, but expansions come out. There are cards that have similar effects as older cards. And just because an older card happens to be grossly imbalanced and better than the new card, they all of a sudden think that the new card will never see play. And this is just bad logic because you have 30 cards in a deck. It's not. I understand most people on Reddit probably like can't read words that are too long. So maybe they always do like Tavern Brawl mode and they're used to having 2 cards in a deck list only. But in Constructed, you get to have 30 cards, right? So even though Druid has 2 Innervates, first of all, this is a Rogue card. You are not playing Innervates in your Rogue deck instead of this card. So, bad argument there. Second of all, Counterfeit Coin, if you could play both, you would play both. I would play Counterfeit Coin in Druid. I'd play Counterfeit Coin in Rogue. I'd play this card in every damn deck in the game. This card's dumb. Yeah. That's all I have to say about it. This card changes the way the entire Rogue class plays. And until the end of fucking time, this is going to be a 2 of in the deck, I think, except for the aggro Pirate Rogue list, which will be a very good deck, I think. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. We got Gadgetzan Ferryman, combo return a friendly minion to your hand. Yeah, Reddit was in an uproar because they don't understand the game. Like, Rogue is not in that bad of a spot right now. It's a very competitive deck. It's a great hard counter to Druid, which is a very popular deck. Not every rogue card needed to be broken, right? I think the Shadow Rager was like a mistake, but other than that, you know, like I like that Ferryman's in the game, and I actually have a deck where I would play 2 of this card. You guys might have seen me streaming Shadow Rogue, where I already play 2 Shadow Step and 2 Youthful Brewmaster. I'd play this card in that deck as a 2 of in a heartbeat. And I would play it turn 2 as a 2/3 a lot of the time, and later in the game I would get value out of it. This card is like very playable. I don't know if people are hating on it. Battlecry Rogue is a real thing. Will it be better than Jade Golem Rogue? Will it be better than Miracle Rogue? Probably not. It's not as broken, but this card is certainly not a bad inclusion in the expansion, and Rogue was not like in dire straits. Paladin was in a worse spot than Rogue, in my opinion. So yeah, I like Gadgetzan Ferryman, and is it going to see play? Probably not, but there is a deck for it, which is like the Shadowcaster Bran, Panda Rogue deck. Turn 1 Swashbuckler, turn 2 Panda it. It's a very powerful combo. Turn 3 you play Swashbuckler again, and then you Ferryman it. That's a good deck. So yeah, I don't know. I like the card. I'll play it in that deck. We got Shadow Sensei, which is Battlecry, give a stealth minion +2/+2. I have to be playing a lot of stealth cards before I put Shadow Sensei in my deck, like a whole lot. It's a pretty interesting card. Like, I don't know. I shouldn't use the word interesting. It's interesting the way that the 5-mana Druid card in this set is interesting. You just give +2/+2 to beasts. The way that Houndmaster gives buffs to beasts. The way that this gives buffs to stealth minions. I mean, it's another Houndmaster effect. What can I say? The thing about Shadow Sensei is stealth is the best kind of effect to give buffs to. That's why like Stranglethorn Tiger is so good with Menagerie Warden. It just guarantees that your dude sticks around to get buffed. So that alone might be enough reason for this to see play, but what are you really copying, you know? Maybe in Wild you have Shade of Naxxramas, which is great, but in Standard, are you really going to put like Jungle Panther in your deck because of this card? Probably not. Are you going to waste a Conceal on a 3-drop just so you can play this card? Probably not. I don't think it's likely that it sees play, but it's not the absolute worst card I've ever seen. And there might be some sort of heavily stealth, mid-rangey rogue deck. Like, stealth is just such a broken mechanic to begin with. Like, by definition, it eliminates like the only 2 avenues of interaction your opponent has in the game. They can't attack your stuff, they can't target your stuff. So stealth is just a pretty broken mechanic to begin with. It's the kind of mechanic where if I was a game designer, I just would never put it in a game. Like same as Fairy Dragon's effect or Spectral Knight's effect, I would never print those cards. I would just design a new mechanic for Rogue. But it's in the game, and they're going ham on it, so we'll see if it becomes a problem, if there's ever a critical mass of stealth, but yeah, I don't expect Shadow Sensei to see like too much play. I think you're going to see like Jade Golem, and you're going to see like Miracle Rogue, and you're going to see hybrids of the 2. Those are going to be the decks. All right, and we got Lotus Assassin, which this guy I don't even know where to put him in my category of like which deck he goes in. Like, I think this is my feeling on Lotus Assassin. I think the card's insane. I think it's one of the best 5-drops ever made. But I also think Rogue is a deck that's already playing 2 Azure Drake, and you're not going to want to cut Azure Drake. Do you play this? Do you just play 4 5-drops in your deck, like Miracle Rogue, because Lotus Assassin is that good? I think the answer is yes. I think this card is just like stupid broken. I use the word broken, but like it's good. I mean, it's super good. It's not just like kind of good. It's like super, super good. It's one of the best 5-drops ever printed in the game. Stealth is such a grossly uninteractive mechanic. This is good when you're behind. It's good when you're ahead. It's good against control. It's passable against aggro. It's good against mid-range. Lotus Assassin is a good card. If I go first, I can attack Azure Drake with it. And then they're forced to like swipe. It's good. I think Lotus Assassin, I'm just going to put 2 of it in my Rogue decks because I think it's just a stupid card. Whether that works out for me, we'll see, right? Like, maybe it's bad to do. Maybe there's no room for that kind of stuff. But I think there's room for this kind of stuff. And it's going to be, like, the only card in my Rogue deck that's in there just because it's, like, too good not to play. And you can play this on turn 4. God, you can counterfeit coin this out. You can play it turn 4 or turn 3 if you're going second. Then you like eat their 3-drop. Oh god. I don't know. This card seems really good to me. So I'm gonna play it. It's like I guess it's like a delayed 2-turn, kill 2 of their minions type of thing. You can also just go face. I don't know. All right, moving on. We got Lucky Do Buccaneer. If your weapon has at least 3 attack, gain +4/+4. If this card was always a 9/9 with no condition, I would still not put it in my deck on purpose. So I think this card's bad. It is a pirate, but yeah. I just don't expect that to see much play at all. And then we got Shaku the Collector, which is actually a pretty good card. Shaku's pretty solid. He actually works with the 4-drop stealth buff. There's like so many good stealth cards that maybe you do just play the 4-drop at this point. Maybe. It's definitely a possibility. Worgen Infiltrator is not the worst card in the game if you really need to go that route. But Shaku's a good card. Like, this card is strong. I feel like... How do I describe this? Shaku is... When people see a legendary and it doesn't just like win them the game on its own, like Edwin, they don't get excited about it, but this is just a good value card. Rogue doesn't have many good options on 3 mana. It gets you value, and then it forces an answer immediately. It's good when you're behind, because you guarantee getting the card, and you guarantee being able to make the trade that you want. It lets your rogue snowball by just killing stuff. Like, if you play SI Agent on turn 3, and your opponent just plays like a big minion into it, they can't do that if it's Shaku, you know? They can't give you another card. They're forced to spend 4 mana, like wrathing your guy and hero powering you or something. And, I think it's just pretty strong in multiple lists of Rogue, and I expect to play this card a lot. So I'm going to start off by just putting it in all my Rogue decks and just seeing if it's just good enough to put in like stuff. Because to me it looks like, yes, it's good enough to do that. It's like very perfectly balanced is what it feels like. I absolutely hate the mechanic of adding random crap to your hand from your opponent's entire class. I think those kinds of effects are just bad for the game. I made an entire video about how they eliminate counterplay. If you haven't seen my counterplay video, I'd recommend you check it out. This crap and portals where they're pulling from such a big range, I think it's just not a healthy way for these cards to do stuff. But that is in fact how it works, and can't complain about it now because it's being made. So, I mean, I can complain about it, and I will, but it won't change anything. But yeah, I mean, I think the card's good, so underrated. Moving on, we got Call in the Finishers, summon 4 1/1 Murlocs. You can compare this to literally any other card in the game that costs 4 mana and be pretty disappointed. I don't expect this to see much play. This is not what Murloc Shaman needed to be a thing. So I'm just going to move on past this card. We got Jade Lightning, which is a super interesting card. Super interesting. So, man, I don't know. I've been playing this Jade League, or sorry, not Jade. I've been playing the Celestial League Invitational Tournament lately. It's like this really big league, a Chinese league, and it's this 9-deck format across multiple formats, like Wild, Standard, Wild without GVG, Wild without Nax. So I've been playing a lot of Wild. And in Wild, when I got to play with Implosion again, that card is just so good. I mean, the card, like, when you haven't played with Implosion in a long time, like, even when you roll 2s, what a sick card that is. Like, what a sick card. To be able to kill your opponent's board and then flip the board state all with a 4-mana card that's a 2-for-1. You literally flip who has initiative, you flip the board state, so it's a good tempo play, and you also get card advantage. Like, you 2-for-1 your opponent on top of that. Jade Lightning is nuts. Now, for Jade Lightning to be good, you need the Jade Golem to actually be relevant. So that's going to require cutting some of your broken mid-range Shaman cards for less broken, but still pretty good Jade summoning cards. But, man, what a card Jade Lightning is. Just what a card, dude. It's so good. I don't know. Will it be good enough to to change the current list of mid-range Shaman? Maybe not. I don't know what you can cut from normal mid-range Shaman, because if you play Jade Lightning, you also need to find like room for 6 other cards or something. So I don't know if that's possible to cut that many cards from a Shaman list right now, but if it is possible, it's definitely interesting. And, you know, after some things rotate out, this might be the way Shaman plays the game. But yeah, Jade Lightning specifically, man, if you're playing a Jade deck, what a nuts card this is. If you're not playing a Jade deck, then we're not really going to hear about this card at all, right? It's like Cthulhu's Chosen, man. Either it's nuts and everyone's playing it, or, you know, nobody's playing it, and you never hear from this card again. But it is very strong, especially in the Jade Golem deck, yeah. Jade Chieftain, Battlecry, summon a Jade Golem, give it Taunt. I mean, this really just depends on how many good Jade Golem summoning cards there are in Shaman, and how many cheaper ones you're playing in your deck to enable these kinds of effects, because you're going to play some of the neutral ones in Shaman probably. There aren't that many good Jade Golem summoners in this class, outside of Jade Lightning and the weapon. So overall, Jade Chieftain, like, it's playable, but until I actually play with the card a lot, it's tough for me to say how good it is or how bad it is. 7 mana is like pretty reasonable, so I mean, if you're getting like at least a 4/4 out of this, I'd say it's worth it. Getting a 3/3 is like, depends on the board. If they can kill it immediately, it's not that impressive. But yeah, Jade Chieftain's an interesting card. I think current mid-range Shaman is just too broken for you to really want to change that many cards. But if you do change cards and you want to try out the Jade Golem package, that is certainly an option now. Then we got Devolve, which is a card that I have no idea how to evaluate. Actually, none at all. Like, just like normal Evolve, man. Normal Evolve was also like the most impossible to evaluate card. Like, you can imagine these scenarios where it's absolutely broken, but you can also imagine, like, I don't know. You can also imagine scenarios where it's kind of dead in your hand. People aren't really flooding the board against Shaman too much right now anyway, because they're used to, you know, the 4 AoE spells being in the deck. Do you need more than 4 AoE spells? I don't know. I think you play one of this and just try it out and see how it plays. I think it's at its best in a mid-rangey type of Shaman list, because you're going to want to basically shrink your opponent's minions and then trade into them yourself. This is going to help your rogue matchup, because Devolve is very good against stealth minions, of course. So it's just an interesting card. Like, I don't think it's broken, but it is playable, I think. I think it's probably going to be a tech call to hard counter certain things. You know, it's gonna counter, like, I don't know, things with stealth, Doomsayers, Death Rattles. It's good against like N'Zoth decks. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with it, but I think it's gonna be more of a metagame call. I don't think you just jam 2 of this in your deck. I think that would be probably a mistake. We got Jade Claws, Battlecry, summon a Jade Golem. I mean, yeah, you know, same thing as I said about the other Jade cards, right? Like, if you're playing the Jade Golem Shaman deck, you're going to play this. Jade Claws is balanced, unlike the last Claws they released. You know, it's only a 2-mana 2/2. Honestly, the Jade Golem deck looks kind of aggressive for Shaman. It's weird because Jade Lightning and Jade Claws just want to go face. But then you have this Jade Chieftain, which is like this weird mid-rangey duder, which you might not even play anyway. Yeah, it's possible that there's a small Jade sub-theme to like a more aggressive Shaman list that's out there. But, you know, until I really play with this kind of card, it's really tough to evaluate these kinds of mechanics. Like, it's just like Cthulhu. Like, is there a deck there that's kind of viable? Yes. Is that deck like tier 1 and you're going to see it a lot? Maybe. Is that deck completely worse than every other archetype of Shaman? Maybe. Until you actually play with it, you can't say one way or the other. It is a playable deck. The question is it the Shaman deck or is it a Shaman deck? A lot like, you know, all the Farsight lists and stuff like that. So we'll see. Weak stat line and the overload on that sucks, but it's not the end of the world. Then we got Jinyu Water Speaker, which I think is worse than Healing Wave, I think. Good stats, obviously, but I just... Like, okay, if I'm playing a control-y Shaman deck, and I want a healing effect. I already have access to Healing Wave. So this guy gives me stats, but if I'm playing a control Shaman deck, I need a win condition. So what's my win condition going to be? Probably Barnes, Rag, N'Zoth, just like every other deck in the game. So in that kind of deck, this is bad with Barnes. So I would rather play a Healing Wave and then just like Barnes into Sylvanas or Cairn. You know, that kind of stuff. Like, it's not a bad card by any means. It's actually a very good healing card. Very, very good. It's better than Healbot, I would say. But with that said, Shaman didn't play Healbot very often, and if it did, it was at a time when there wasn't really a refined... Like, Shaman didn't have that many playables to make a broken deck like it does now. So we'll see. I mean, if you want a third healing effect, you can play this on top of Healing Waves. But yeah, it really just depends. I want to be doing broken stuff in the standard format. I don't want to be grinding out games with my little life gain cards and some card draw and some removal. There's too many expansions in the game to play the game fairly right now. You have to be doing broken stuff. And I think N'Zoth is broken stuff, and I think Healing Wave is better with that kind of strategy. Then we got Finders Keepers, which is discover a card with Overload, and Overload's one itself. It's kind of like a 2-mana cycle. I really do not like this card, even with Unbound Elemental. To spend 2 mana overall to discover another card that's going to make me lose mana, it's just weak, I think. I don't expect Finders Keepers to see much play at all. Even in aggressive like Unbound Elemental lists, I think Finders Keepers is just weak. It is a way to like generate more burn, I guess. I don't actually know how many cards with Overload exist. If I go through every single one of them and calculate the odds on actually getting like direct damage off of this, that's kind of interesting. Even getting like Elemental Destruction in an aggro deck is pretty good because you buy time to draw into your burn. It's possible that there's an Overload heavy Shaman list that plays this, but that class just has such a good deck already. You just don't need to make that many changes. I don't think adding Finders Keepers is going to make it better. The Lotus Illusionist, I think, is pretty bad. It was a very exciting card when I first saw it, but the thing is, the card has counterplay, which is great. I like the design of it, right? I just don't think it'll be competitively viable. I love the design on the card. Your opponent knows it's going to do insane stuff, so they're going to go out of their way to kill it. It creates this tension on the board. And then the issue here is it only transforms if you attack face. So if you could play it and then trade with it and it evolves after the trade, that would be an incredible card. But the fact that you're forced to like play a 4-mana 3/5 that also doesn't affect the board because you have to go face to upgrade your minion, that's like very sketchy, right? You only want to go face in like face-oriented Shaman decks, which are going to prefer to play Flame Wreath. So I don't expect Lotus Illusionist to see too much play. That deck doesn't need more 4-drops. It's not like completely unplayable, but it's on the weaker end, and you know, Shaman is just so good right now that the better a deck is, the harder it is for like the better a deck is, the better a card has to be to make it into that list. So yeah. Moving on, we got White Eyes. White Eyes, the last Shaman card of the set. 5-mana 5/5 taunt, Death Rattle. This is the future of N'Zoth, man. This is like a flashy example of where I think RNG has gone in this expansion, which is towards a type of randomness that's based around card draw and cards in your hand, rather than on-board randomness, which seems like a very conscious decision from them. And I like that. There's a lot less juggles, and there's a lot more how good is this card based on when I draw it, which is a different kind of RNG. It's not... I prefer this to Arcane Missiles, to be honest. If my card does what it says it will do all of the time, it's less frustrating for one player. Will you draw badly and still get tilted and lose because of it? Of course. But when you're drawing badly, at least the cards that you're playing will do what they say they will do, as opposed to stuff like Arcane Missiles or Flame Juggler, where it's like, 50% to just wreck you. Anyway, White Eyes, I think it is competitively viable. It's a card I have to play with a lot to figure out if it's good enough. It's very, very borderline, I think, for just slapping in a normal mid-range Shaman. Like, I think it's good enough in that deck because you're going to play Barnes anyway. It's like, I think this is good enough in that deck, but it's close, right? Like, you could argue Fire Elemental or Alakir or whatever card is better. So, but yeah, White Eyes is certainly playable. We'll see if he's enough to make the N'Zoth Shaman deck a solid archetype, but I'm a fan. It adds more of that card draw RNG that I'm talking about, right? Like, if it dies and you draw your 10/10 immediately, then you're in a winning position. If it takes you a long time to draw your 10/10, then it's not that good. So it's better in attrition decks, I guess, because it's at its best when you draw the 10/10 at some point. Yeah, it's another card that makes Control Warrior's life very hard as well. All right, so excuse me. We got Blast Crystal Potion. Destroy a minion and one of your mana crystals. This is a card that I think is just pretty terrible. Like, even in Reno, where you want more hard removal, like Siphon Soul, you're only really happy playing this card on turn 10. If you can use the word happy. I would prefer Big Game Hunter, which I think is very good right now. I would prefer Siphon Soul, which obviously is in the deck. I would prefer just Shadow Flaming something, or like playing Sylvanas. I don't think you need Blast Crystal Potion. I don't think this is necessary. You would never play it as just like a normal card in like a mid-rangey deck. You certainly won't play it in Control over your other options, even in a Reno type of list. So I think it's pretty unplayable. It's a powerful potion to get, though. You know, it's definitely a strong effect a lot of the time. But yeah, you know, compare it to Assassinate, it's just not good enough on average. Crystal Weaver says battle cry, give your demons +1/+1. This is something I really have to think about. Like, I'm pretty sure this card's unplayable. If you compare it to like Defender of Argus, the conditions that you have to meet for this to be good enough for you are pretty absurd. It feels very unlikely that a card like this triggers on curve, because you want to be playing with cheap demons before it. I just don't see Zoo having the room for it. I prefer to play Barnes, I prefer to play Rag, I prefer to play the 5/4 Goblin that draws 3 cards when he attacks. So yeah, Crystal Weaver, I think, just too weak, but it's an interesting arena card. By interesting, I mean vanilla 5/4 that you will draft sometimes. He's not even a demon himself. We got Abyssal Enforcer, deal 3 damage to all other characters. It's a powerful card. You know, you'll definitely play it in the Reno lists. Outside of the Reno lists, I don't think it'll see too much play. Maybe there's a controlling Warlock deck that plays 2 copies of everything, because now you have the 1 mana healing guy. The 1 mana 2/2 neutral that gains 4 life for both players. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's costed pretty aggressively. It's a strong effect. Having access to another Hellfire is going to make Shaman's life so much harder. This card is insane against mid-range Shaman. And yeah, I think pretty clear card to just include in your slow Warlock decks, but the aggressive ones aren't going to be playing it. Next we got Blood Fury Potion. Give a minion +3 attack. If it's a demon, also give it +3 health. It's just not going to see play. You'll get it randomly off of potions sometimes, but there's just no scenario where you end up playing it. I'm going to kind of speed up the rate that I'm doing this review at, because I'm like an hour 40, and I didn't even notice. We got Sea Devil Stinger says the next Murloc you play this turn costs health instead of mana. Again, even in the Warlock Murloc deck, this is not good enough. Just compare the stats to Chillwind Yeti, and like tell me if that's worth it. If I'm playing like a War Leader or a Cold Light Seer in the same turn, like actually how many stats like per card am I getting? It's just so much worse than Zoo. It blows my mind. This card could have been like a 4/4, and it still would have been not good enough probably. Maybe there's something in future expansions that make Murlocs strong though. Moving on, we got Fellfire Potion, which is a really big Hellfire. I think you do play one in Reno Lock. It's important to have another sweeper, especially one on turn 6, which is not one that you've had. It's not a turn that you've had a sweeper available for before. It's a lot of self-inflicted damage in Warlock now, so it's nice to have the neutral 1-drop to help heal up, but that's kind of the only good healing. It's the only obvious healing to include from this set, so Warlock definitely needs more of that. If you draw Reno, you're set, your deck's awesome, but if you don't draw Reno, then you're going to have a hard game. Moving on, we got Unlicensed Apothecary. Whenever you summon a minion, deal 5 damage to your hero. I mean, I assume he triggers upon summoning himself as well. It's an interesting card. The thing about Warlock right now is, like, you wouldn't play this in a control deck. You would play this in a more aggressive Warlock deck. So it's worse than Darkshire Councilman, and it's worse than Imp Gang Boss. So those 3 drops already take precedence. And then it's like the question is, do you want to play a 5th or a 6th 3-drop? And if so, is this really better than Argent Horse Rider? And I think the answer is probably no. There's just a lot of matchups where this isn't good enough, like Hunter. But like, for it to be good, it has to be staying alive. And when it's staying alive, you're killing yourself. It's tough for me to get behind this card, you know? But maybe, I don't know, it's ballsy. Maybe it's good enough to see playing just like the most outrageously aggressive Zoo deck, but I want to say it's like very unlikely. We got Cabal Trafficker, which is at the end of your turn, add a random demon to your hand. This card's just bad, I want to say. Emperor Thorson, too much stronger. Sylvanas is way too much stronger. You don't need that many 6-drops. Siphon Soul, you'd rather play. Yes, it gets value, but you don't need your expensive Warlock cards need to be catching you up on tempo. You don't need more value from your expensive Warlock cards because your hero power gives you value. So when I play a 6-drop, it needs to catch me up on tempo, which is why like the 7-mana Demon guy, for example, is good, right? He Hellfires when he comes into play. Like, that's what I want my expensive cards to do. If I want value, if I want to draw demons, I'm going to put them in my deck and I'm going to life tap. I don't need a really, really big Azure Drake at all. I mean, sure, it's like better than that, right? Because it forces them to kill it, or else it keeps drawing cards, but Alright. And then we got Cruelly Unshackled. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, summon all demons from your hand. So it says summon, so I assume you get battle cries. I notice there's a few summon cards. This is actually a rules check question that I have to ask because it matters for this card and it matters for the rat, the 2-drop rat, Dirty Rat or whatever it's called. Cruelly Unshackled is a card that I think isn't good enough to put in your deck in Reno Lock. I think in Reno Lock, your only expensive demons you're playing are going to be the 7-mana guy that Hellfires, Jiraxis. That's about it. You know, I don't want to be playing other garbage to make this card better. It's a 9-mana 7/9, so whatever demons I put into play have to kind of stabilize me. I just don't see enough demons being in Standard, at least, maybe in Wild, but in Standard, I just don't see there being enough demons that I want to have in my deck anyway that make this card worth it. So overall, like if I play Doomguard off of this, do I discard as well? Is that how that works? Not sure. Got to figure that out. I mean, regardless, I think it's unplayable either way, regardless of how summoning works. But you know, not every single Reno legendary card has to be strong, and that's okay. So moving on to Warrior. We got I Know a Guy. A lot more taunts in this set. I don't love this card. If I'm playing like an Arcane Giant Battle Rage type of Warrior deck, I kind of like this because it's upping my spell count while also giving me a minion to play in the meantime. The drawback being, of course, that I'm paying an extra mana for a taunt minion that might be worse than just a taunt minion I put in my deck anyway. On the bright side, with a Warrior deck that wants a taunt minion, you're not going to be doing stuff on turn 1 too often. Unless it's like a Tempo King's Defender deck, but you wouldn't play that in this deck. You wouldn't play this in that deck. I Know a Guy in general, it's a very niche card for that Arcane Giant deck. I think outside of that, you'd rather just be playing Bloodhoof Braves in your deck if that's a card you want to be drawing. There's enough good taunts available that you can just put the good ones in your deck and not have to pay the extra mana to play this card and hopefully get the good taunts. So yeah, I think in general it's not going to see too much play competitively, but there's always that Arcane Giant deck that's a couple cards away from becoming insane, so maybe I'll test it out in that. We got Public Defender, the world's largest shield bearer. I don't know, man. The bolster deck's going to get good at some point. Is today that day? Probably not. But now there's a 2-mana 07. Let's go. You know, if I'm going to play a 2-mana 07, I'm going to have it be Doomsayer, which actually trades 1-for-1 and gives me initiative. This card, even in a bolster deck, I don't think makes the cut. If you compare, like, to Shield Bearer, it's, like, worse value per mana, right? Yeah. So, overall, Public Defender, I don't think it's going to see too much play, but it's an interesting card. I like that it's in the game, because there hasn't been a card like that quite yet. We got Grimy Gadgeteer. At the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. This card's pretty strong and snowbally. If you have the board when you play it, you're forcing them to immediately answer it rather than play their own minion. And you're still getting, 6-5 worth of stats overall over the course of the game. That's pretty powerful. It's not piloted Shredder levels of powerful. It's kind of like a delayed piloted Shredder. But it is good, and I imagine this is a core part of hand buffing warrior decks. The thing about warrior, though, is cards have to be so good to make the cut. And if I'm playing a dragon list, I'd rather have Twilight Guardian. I'd rather have Kor'kron Elite. If I'm playing an aggro list, I'd rather have Kor'kron Elite. I'd rather have Mortal Strike, if you want to count it as a 4-drop. It's very tough to find room for this in decks that want this effect. Because there's not enough cards that like benefit off of being really big in your hand as a warrior. Alright, moving on, we got Stolen Goods. Give a random taunt minion in your hand +3/+3. I mean, if I compare this to Bolster, it's like infinitely worse. If I compare it to Rampage, it's infinitely worse. It's like worse than cards that I've never seen play up to this point, and that's a really bad sign. Like, if I have to commit this card before I... Like, this is the nice thing about buffs that you can just play, like Mark of the Wild and stuff. If I play a big minion from my hand, I take the risk that he has big removal, and if he has his big removal, whatever, I got 1-for-1. It's not card disadvantage, right? With Stolen Goods, I have to commit my card ahead of time on buffing my minion, so I'm committing my Stolen Goods, and then when I play my big taunt minion that it's Stolen Goods buffed, now if they have that removal, I just got 2-for-1. So it just opens you up to all of this risk, because you have to buff your minion before it gets to attack. And that's really the problem. For a buff card to be good, you need to be able to play it on a minion that doesn't have Summoning Sickness, get the attack immediately and trade with something, and then even if they have removal, you got your value out of your card. So, because maybe it changed the way you trade or what kind of removal he had to use. So, yeah, overall I think pretty weak. I think like, it would have to be +4/+4 for this card to be good. Alright, Grime Street Pawnbroker. I actually think this card's nuts. 3-mana 3/3 and you get to upgrade. It's so powerful. Like with cards like, I mean, obviously with Gorehowl, that's like the dream, but just in general with anything, you upgrade a Fiery War Axe with this, or just almost any weapon. King's Defender, like, it's so strong when you do that. Like, it's just so strong. I think it is tough to add 3-drops to warrior decks because you have so many playable 3-drops already, but I mean, if you're going to do it, this card is super playable. You know how like Ravaging Ghoul tacked on a Whirlwind to it and became just like a super god tier card? I mean, this is the same thing. You're getting a 3-mana 3/3 and you're tacking on an upgrade. And upgrade's a pretty solid card. A little bit more situational, a little bit less things that combo with it than Whirlwind, but still a pretty good card. Upgrade's been played on its own. So, yeah, 3-mana 3/3 plus 1-mana warrior spell, I think is pretty powerful. So I've got high hopes for this card. I think it'll surprise us. We got Alley Armorsmith. I think I saw some handsome gentleman with a very average-sized forehead reveal this card on YouTube. Yeah, this is like one of the only payoffs in Warrior for buffing cards in your hand. I mean, if you buff it up, Alley Armorsmith is insane. But the problem is it's like the only card that gets a bonus from being buffed up in your hand, right? Aside from neutrals that you include. So, is it worth playing cards like Stolen Goods just for the sake of your Alley Armorsmith? I think no. It might be worth playing Bolster, because Bolster is actually a super powerful card if you buff 2 minions with it. Like, super powerful. So in the Bolster deck, I would play it. Stolen Goods is not going to be a thing just because this card's a thing. This card is powerful, though. I mean, just in a Control Warrior deck, there's a high chance you play it as well. There's going to be a lot more Cabal Shadow Priest now, but there might be a way to play around that with a buff or something. But yeah, overall, Alien Armorsmith is like, it's a playable card. I think it's fine. We'll see what archetypes it ends up sliding into, though. Then we got Sleep with the Fishes, which is one of my favorite artworks of the set. I think it's pretty funny. Deal 3 damage to all damaged minions. I mean, it really feels to me like a 2-card combo in order to clear the board. Does a warrior need an effect like this? I think the answer is like maybe. Like maybe you play one in like that Arcane Giant deck I was talking about. This is like the deck already has a lot of whirlwinds, right? So maybe this is another way to just wipe the board in a really powerful way. I'll start by testing out one of it and see how it goes, but I think outside of like the Pyromancer warrior decks, you're not going to see this as like a staple 2 of or anything like that in many archetypes. Brass Knuckles, after your hero attacks, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. If you just compare this to Weaponsmith, you're getting the stats in a delayed fashion and you're paying for the weapon right away. It's just not good enough. It's too slow. The payoff's not high enough. This card doesn't make the cut. It's not good enough, period. Then we got Hobart Grapplehammer. So this card's another example of like card draw RNG, in that if it's in your opening hand, you're chilling. Your game's, you're in a real good spot. But if it's not in your opening hand, if you draw it later, it has so much less impact. Whereas if you like coin it out on turn 1, it completely changes the way you play the game. So yeah, overall, it's still early game RNG, but it's like it's a less tilting type of RNG. Like it's still going to be frustrating to lose to drawing things like Patches or Hobart in the wrong order, but it's still better RNG than like playing a card with an expected result and then having that result just make one of the 2 players angry. I think this is like the better way to introduce RNG, which is with card draw order. And again, this doesn't have the word random on it, but it's random because if you draw it early, it's obviously going to be an incredible god tier card. And if you draw a late game, it's just bad. It's a vanilla 2/2. So it really depends. All right, moving on to neutrals. I'm going to grind through these a little faster. It's taking a really long time. Sorry, guys. Grime Street Smuggler. This is Battle Cry. Give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. I think the stats for this just aren't good enough to be competitive right now. I mean, it's close, man. This card's like almost there, you know, but you compare it to like Frothing Berserkers and Blackwing Technicians and Fierce Monkeys, and you can just have those extra stats kind of up front. Hunter already has so many other 3-drops, but Hunter's the one deck that has 2 cards that really care about getting buffed. So maybe in Hunter, that's a deck that I play this in. Overall, though, it's probably just not quite costed aggressively enough to see play in Constructed Standard. Moving on, we got Grime Street Informant. Sorry about the background noise. 2 mana 1/1, discover a Hunter, Paladin, or Warrior card. Yeah, these 2 mana discover things are so interesting to me because, you know, if it's the same value as Novice Engineer technically, which is not playable, but you're talking about a card that can like break the barrier of what your class can do. Like imagine, how do I describe it? I mean, imagine Warrior with equality, you know? Like there's so many, or like Hunter's Mark or something. There's so many cross synergies between these class cards that just being able to randomly do broken stuff that your class shouldn't be able to do might make this playable, even if on average it's not like great value. I think this is the kind of card. I made a video about my thoughts on this mechanic and how I think, you know, I like the mechanic, but I don't like that it further blurs the lines between class identities within Hearthstone. This is like an example of that, you know, like people always do those thought exercises of like, what would be the best deck if there are no class restrictions, right? If you could play any cards from any class all in the same deck. And that's what these cards kind of do to some extent, right? So there might just be some broken card you look for in a deck, and maybe you're trying to like set up Brand plus Grime Street Informant to make it happen or something. We'll see. All right, moving on. We got Don Honcho, 7 mana, 5/6. Give a random minion in your hand +5/+5. It's a big vanilla dude, which takes your entire turn to play, and then he lets you spend another entire turn to play another big vanilla dude. And then you wait a third turn, and then that big vanilla dude that you played gets to attack. It's just too slow, too beefy. I mean, unless you're trying to set up some sort of ridiculous combo by buffing up a guy in your hand, I just don't see this being played much. Outside of like being used as a cold blood combo piece type of thing in some kind of weird deck. But yeah, outside of that, I'm not too impressed. All right, next we got Jade Spirit. I think it's going to be unlikely that this sees play in any of the Jade decks, but maybe, just maybe, it makes the cut somewhere. If you're playing like a 4-mana, 2/3 plus a Jade Golem, that Jade Golem has to be like a 3/3 before this is worth it for you. And I think it's kind of unlikely. It's also overlap. Like, okay, the one class that really wanted more Jade cards was Shaman, because it has the good Implosion card. And not much else besides the weapon. But the problem there is Jade Spirit also costs 4 mana, so you can't really curve Jade Spirit into the Jade Implosion. So I don't really think this will see too much play, but maybe, just maybe, it's one of those things where, like, I think this is just like one of the weaker Cthulhu cards of the set, basically, and that's how I feel about the Jade mechanic. I see it as similar to Cthulhu. Yeah, I think this will be kind of like the 7/6 for 7, But this is better than that. I don't know. Maybe it'll see play. I don't want to say never. It's possible. All right, we got Lotus Agents, Battle Cry, discover a Druid, Rogue, or Shaman card. I mean, man, if you compare this to Ethereal Conjurer, it's very similar, and it's a pretty powerful effect to give to classes that might want it. Rogue just has too many 5-drops now. You got Azure Drake, you got the Stealth guy. Shaman's had too many 5-drops forever. You also have Azure... Like, all 3 of these classes are Azure Drake classes, right? Druid, I think I want to play Barnes in, so I'm probably not going to play Lotus Agents. But if I did want another card draw card, I actually think Lotus Agents is probably better than the 5-mana Druid spell that draws 2. So, if anything, this will see play in Druid. I think in the other 2 decks, you're not going to see much of it, though. This is the type of card that actually gives Rogue access to healing, though. So if you want to put Lotus Agents in your like Rogue Miracle deck, and then discover, maybe you get Healing Wave, maybe you get the new Shaman 3/6 guy that heals you, maybe you get Feral Rage or Healing Touch or something like that, There's a lot of ways that this enables classes to do things they shouldn't be able to do. Druid can play it and find like removal for a big minion. You can find a Hex, you can find a Burn Spell, you can find like Shadow Strike, Assassinate, Sap. So it helps shore up the weakness of the class playing it in some cases, but we'll see if that's good enough to see play. Then we got Aya Blackpaw, which is good enough for the Jade Golem decks because she's just good value to begin with, but mostly because she works with Barnes. Barnes is broken. I know I say Barnes a lot, but I think the metagame will become a point, just like with Yogg-Saron, where like every deck just gradually changes a few cards until it's a Barnes deck, Just getting free wins is too powerful of an effect. But yeah, I think you do play in the Jade decks. I'm not 100% sure, but she seems strong enough. At least in Druid, I'll be playing her for sure, because you have the ramp, so 6-mana card's better. And that deck cares about triggering multiple Jade cards with fewer dedicated card slots. Like, I don't want to play 20 Jade cards in my Druid deck and some ramp. That'd be bad. I want to play removal and card draw and ramp. So the fact that this one card gets me 2 Jade Golem triggers is a very big deal, because it's going to buff all my other Jade cards that I'm drawing into later. Alright, moving on, we got Cabal Chemist, Battle Cry, add a random potion to your hand. I just don't see this being played, but I mean, maybe there's a deck out there that just wants more spells in hand. Like maybe you just throw it in like Tempo Mage or something. I think it's unlikely, but it's possible. I think the stats are too weak, though. We'll see moving forward, though. Definitely an interesting card. There's a lot of bad potions to hit, though. We got Cabal Courier, which is Battlecry, Discover a Mage, Priest, or Warlock card. So all of the faction Discover guys have different stat lines. I think you... Let's see, like, I don't know if you even play this in your Reno deck. Maybe you do, but the stat line is so bad. It's possible that it's worth it anyway because you get a chance of getting the legendary Reno cards, but I don't know how likely that actually is. Not very. But yeah, most likely not going to see play, just like the potion guy, but we'll see. The 4-mana 3/3 Battlecry at a random potion guy, that is. Kazakis, on the other hand, will see play. Auto include in all of your Reno decks. He's super powerful. The low mana cost potions, especially, just are nuts, like 1 mana and 5 mana. Just a super powerful card, super fun. I love the design. It tells a story. It has some amount of execution behind it. The only thing I don't like about this card is I know that the second it gets played, my opponent's roping. The second he gets played. So as soon as they play it, I'm going to get up from the stream for a bathroom break. But other than that, I do love the card. I think it's great design. Really brilliant design. Like Blizzard outdid themselves on this, right? I realize how much effort a card like Kazakis takes to make. You need a vision for it in the first place. You're having it tell a story. It needs to be thematic. You need card art for like all the individual potions. It's this character in and of himself is some sort of spooky backstory thing with dragons. Like they really put a ton of time into this one card, and I realize that you can't do that with 300 cards in a set, but I wish that this amount of time was put into like Barnes, for example, and they made like a miniature version of all like a bunch of iconic legendaries that he can summon at random, you know. Like somebody on Reddit said like Tyrion Dishwasher is like a 1/1 taunt that Barnes summons, and Death Rattle you add like a 2/2 weapon for 2 to your hand or something, or like add a 2/1 weapon to your hand. Tyrion's Fork or something. You know what I mean? Like, well, it's so much more effort to do things like that, but I think it'd be very cool if they did. So, yeah. Really props to Blizzard for making that card. So really, it also showcases something that digital card games can do that other games can't. So definitely knocked it out of the park with that one. Mistress of Mixtures. 1 mana, restore 4 health to both players. I love this card. I love that Warlock gets it. I've been desperate for more good Warlock healing. This card was made for that class, dude. Control Warlock decks are some of my favorite in the game to play, and they've just been lacking healing. You've been like forced to play Reno because you have no other healing, because Farseer is just not enough. But now that you have this, it works so well with Life Tap. You're doing something turn 1, which you don't usually do. You get a tap on 2, tap on 3, play a second one. I don't know, man. I like it. Really excited for this card. I think it's going to be pretty iconic for a lot of control decks. It's worse than Zombie Chow on average, I would say, but better than Zombie Chow in some matchups. So we'll see. It's not exactly comparable to Zombie Chow. They do very different things. This card can be used to actually keep your life total up, whereas Zombie Chow is all about winning the board. Blowgill Sniper. This card blows. Friendly Bartender. At the end of your turn, restore 1 health to your hero. A little bit underrated. If you really desperately need a 2-drop in something like Priest, this is way better than the Geode card. Probably still not good enough to see play, but yeah, that's cool. I mean, I like cards like this. I would really like to see like a 2-mana 2/3 with Battlecry, gain 2 life. Speaking of which, they actually made Gadgetzan Socialite, which is it's actually the next card on the list. So yeah, Voodoo Doctor for 1 extra mana and 1 extra health. If this card was a 2/3 instead of a 2/2, it would be worth discussing. As a 2-mana 2/2, it will never see play, ever, under any circumstances. So I'm just going to skip past that. Backstreet Lepers, same thing. They're taking 1-mana cards in the game, like Voodoo Doctor and Leper Gnome, and they're just upping some stats on them in an inefficient way. So yeah, these cards are intentionally weak. So yeah, they're not going to see too much play. Hired Gun, I don't think you're going to put this card in your deck on purpose too often, but you might discover it off of I Know a Guy sometimes or stuff like that. Fierce Monkey is generally going to be better. You're not going to play it in too many decks. But yeah, just a solid neutral that exists. Good in Arena, I think. So Street Trickster is a super interesting card. 3 mana 0/7. So spell damage has become like very fashionable, I guess is the word, in high legend play. People are putting every kind of kobold in every kind of deck. Gara got rank 1 legend with double kobold geomancer. There's a bunch of druid players playing the 4 mana 2/6 kobold. People are playing Jungle Moonkin Curator Druid. They're playing Evolved Kobold and Freeze Mage and Rogue and sometimes Druid. It's like all the spell damage guys are seeing play except Dalaran Mage. And this one is like interesting because, okay, it doesn't fight back, but it's hard to kill immediately, and it just gives you like prolonged value over several turns. I am very, very curious about how playable this card is. I'm going to try it out in a lot of different classes, and it most likely won't make the cut, but just because of the whole fad of running spell damage and everything, it's entirely possible that this card becomes a staple in some decks. It's just so hard to kill, and it makes your spells so much more powerful, like even in Tempo Mage. I mean, obviously, if you lose the board, it sucks because they kill it so quickly, like Doomsayer, but it's also kind of nice that you get to recover the board with it if they just deal damage to it but don't finish it off. We've got Toxic Sewer Ooze, another option for stat line for anti-weapon stuff. A lot of the time I play Acidic Ooze that's in decks like Priest, where I'm desperate for the 2-drop aspect of it anyway. But I can imagine a scenario where I have a lot of 2-drops already, and I would just prefer the extra stats in a 3-drop. And in some decks, I'm sure it's a reality. Can't think of one right now, but yeah. Moving on, I don't think you'll see too much play. I think Acidic Ooze is generally a lot better. Harrison's a lot better, but there might be a niche scenario where you're playing it. Moving on, we got Daring Reporter. Whenever your opponent draws a card, gain 1/1. So it's worse than Chillwind Yeti, but after a while it starts getting stronger. You can combo with Cold Light Oracle and stuff like that, but overall your payoff is just vanilla stats. Shaman gets a 4 mana 7/7, and the 4 mana 7/7 is not good enough. It's not good enough for Shaman. They cut it. Like, this card is definitely not good enough for anything. So we're just gonna move on. Hosen Healer. Battlecry, restore a minion to full health. People are going to talk about the Akanai synergies there, but for me, it's just not enough stats for not enough of an effect. If this was a 3/6, then it would probably be, first of all, too good, second of all, actually interesting as to like whether you play it or not. As it is, though, I don't think you ever put that in your deck. Yeah, pretty much ever. Kooky Chemist, another stat mix-up on Crazed Alchemist, or another stat mix-up on a classic set card. I wish they did less of these. It feels like this set has like 10 reprints or something that are just old cards with different stat lines. The Voodoo Doctor, Leper Gnome, this guy, whatever. That's fine. Maybe you'll play this. Crazed Alchemist is generally run as a Doomsayer tech card in Zoo. It's pretty much the only time it sees play. So you need to be able to kill Doomsayer on turn 2 with your aggressive deck, or else you lose too much tempo. So the fact that this can't do that makes me think this will never see play, but it also has better stats for doing crazy combos in Priest and stuff like that. Speaking of which, now that we have Pint-Sized Potion, it's possible that we might go back to the days of Priest running Crazed Alchemist sometimes. We'll see. You never know. All right, moving on, we got Naga Corsair. Battlecry, give your weapon 1 attack. Not giving the weapon durability really hurts. It's not an awful card, but a 4 mana 5/4 just has to do a lot more, I think, to see play. It's just not really going to make the cut, in my opinion. It's close, but I think there are other pirates I'd rather be playing. I'd rather play like Korkron Elite and hit them in the face, usually, for example. But we'll see. Maybe between Upgrade and the new 3 mana guy, you're just going to have a lot of weapon durability, so you want to be playing Naga Corsair and winning the game that way. I mean, I could definitely see that. Alright, Tanaris Hog Chopper. Battlecry, for your opponent's hand is empty, gain charge. This will never see play. It's a very flavorful card, the 3 hog guys. But yeah, this one in particular will never be competitive under any circumstances. Worgen Greaser has a new unique stat line, 4 mana, 6/3, vanilla. I like it. We got Grook Fu Master, 5 mana, 3/5, Wind Fury, another just vanilla guy for Arena. Solid there, not solid and constructed. Red Mana Worm is kind of an interesting card. This is actually a potentially good finisher in Miracle Rogue, which now has its choice of 1,000,000,000 5-drops, apparently. You can conceal this guy, and it kills them really quickly. I mean, like, really quickly. Like, faster than Questing Adventure kills them. And if you have the board, and you just play it on curve, it's, like, better than Adventure in that regard. I don't know. 6 health is a lot, man. It's a 5 mana minion. If you attack them once, they die. Like, I see a lot of potential here. 1 mana Worm, in that whole thought experiment of, you know, what would be the best deck in the game if there were no class restrictions, you would definitely be playing like a Mana Worm Innervate Rogue deck. So now we don't have Innervate, but we have Coin. We don't have Mana Worm, but we have 5 mana big Mana Worm that kills them. I don't know. I think it might be good enough. Especially, I mean, just think about, like, you play this, counterfeit, coin, conceal. Yeah, I don't know. It hits so hard, you know? If they don't have too big of a board on the turn that you play it, it's very tough to kill a 6 health minion on turn 5. So I'm optimistic. I actually think this will see play in some builds, but we'll see. Moving on, we got Streetwise Investigator. Battlecry, enemy minions lose stealth. So enemy minions losing stealth. This was a kind of card that needed to get printed because Blizzard wants there to be neutral counterplay tools. Like, if you lose to a deck, Blizzard wants there to be something in your collection that you can go to and be like, okay, I want to be prepared for this deck next time I play against it. So this is like Eater of Secrets, or the Demon Silencing card, or like Saboteur against Inspire decks, right? When they make Inspire a mechanic, they add Saboteur. When they decide we are going to push stealth, we're not going to just stop making it in the game, that's when they print Streetwise Investigator. You know, they print some Hoser cards, and I think that's fine. I'm glad that this exists in the game in case that ever gets out of hand. Ancient of Blossoms, 6 mana, 3/8 taunt with some flavor text. Good for him. Some hot pink hair. I like it. It's edgy. Big Time Racketeer. This is what all of my 5-drops are going to evolve into on stream. It's kind of a cool card. So I'm going to 6/6 Ogre. I mean, I don't really know. I guess if you have your own evolve, that's where you get some value out of this, but it seems like a lot of work and a lot of awkward cards that you're playing in order to get an advantage. I'm having a hard time picturing a deck where this sees play, but it will affect evolve RNG and stuff like that. Moonglade Portal is going to get me this a lot, you know. I don't know, man. I don't expect it to see too much play, to be honest, but it does have some synergies with, you know, evolve and bounce effects and stuff like that. So, Small Time Buccaneer. This card is super exciting, man. People are saying Rogue didn't get anything, but Tempo Rogue is actually one of my favorite builds of Rogue. It has been for a long time, and I played it at Top 100 Legend last month for, like, or was it 2 months ago? It was 2 months ago. It was September, I want to say. I streamed it on no delay in Top 100 Legend, like, end of the season for, like, must have been like 20 games, and it held Top 100 Legend, which means 66% win rate. And that was back when Abusive Sergeant was a 2-1. But my 1-drops I was playing were very weak. I was playing Lowly Squire, because hero powering turn 2 is what you want to do in Rogue a lot of times. You know, I was playing Swashbuckler, who was great, obviously. I was playing Buccaneer. This card is better than, like, all of those, except for Swashbuckler. Buccaneer is incredible. It's just a very, very good card. Play it for the same reasons I play Lowly Squire. You know, going second, it's definitely a lot weaker, but this kind of card is just what's going to enable, you know, this along with patches is going to make aggressive Pirate Rogue an actual deck. So, yeah, just excited to be playing with it. It'll be very, very good. We got Backroom Bouncer. Whenever a friendly minion dies, gain 1 attack. Yeah, I mean, card just sucks. I like the art, but pretty clearly weak. But yeah, anyway, sorry, going back to Small Time Buccaneer. That card might be enough to push Tempo Rogue over the edge. You know, now you actually have like enough good 1-drops that plus patches. We'll see. We'll see. Bomb Squad will just never see play, in my opinion. If you can, the reason it won't see play is if you compare it to Assassinate. If Assassinate was a neutral card, would you play it in Druid? Probably not. Still, you'd probably still play Mulch instead. Maybe you'd play Assassinate. Maybe you'd play 1. This is worse than Assassinate. It doesn't kill Ragnaros. So you're basically paying 5 mana for a 5 damage spell to a minion only, which like every class can do something better than that for 5 mana. And then the Death Rattle just wrecks you. Like, and the 2/2 that you get in the meantime for value is just not that much value. So Bomb Squad just feels like a very weak card to me. Pretty much across the board. Like, I don't see doing too much with it. I mean, maybe in the Shadow Step deck I can do some crazy stuff, but outside of that, it seems weak. So Doppelgangster, along with the Monkey, is going to be the standard 5-drop for Hunter, because Hunter's going to play all the hand buffing effects. Yeah, you buff this guy once, and that's a 9/9 for 5. Oh, this card is sick. Absolutely sick. It's a way to kind of force the hand buffs to see some amount of play. It gives all those decks a solid 5-drop, which they didn't necessarily have without this. It's a good card. It's a good card. You know, depending on how playable the hand buff things are, this will be a guaranteed 2 of in all of the decks that are based around that mechanic. Secondary Bruiser costs 2 less for your opponent has at least 3 minions. I think this is just on average going to be like not good enough to play, but you know, maybe, just maybe, after playing a million games of Standard, I'll find room for this guy and he'll kind of make sense in some kind of archetype for me. But you know, we'll see. We'll see how I feel about it. Let's see. Moving down, we got Spiked Hog Rider. If an enemy minion has Taunt, gain charge. It's kind of interesting against like Sludge Belcher and Wild. Its stats aren't bad. The benefit is very good, and the condition is not that hard to meet. So if there's a deck that forces your opponent to have a Taunt somehow, then maybe it's a solid deck. But you know, overall, I'm not expecting it to see any play, obviously, but it's the least unplayable out of all of them, I think. We got Weasel Tunneler. Love the art. Shuffle this minion into your opponent's deck. So yeah, I was wondering if this is worth playing in Hunter, but in Hunter I think you're just going to be tempo-oriented. When you tunnel them, it gives them like a 5% chance to draw an Angry Chicken every single draw step. How often will that actually win you the game? Probably not as often as like a Fiery Bat Juggle or something like that. And you're drawing Angry Chicken 100% of the time when you play this. So, probably not good enough, but it's a cool effect. Richard Garfield designed this whole Parasite mechanic like a decade ago. And then it's cool to see Hearthstone implementing it digitally because it's so hard to implement in person. So they do it with like cards like Beneath the Grounds. They do it with like the Iron Juggernaut Mine. Now they're doing it with Weasel Tunneler. I like it. It's a really cool mechanic. Can be expanded upon a lot. All right, we got Dirty Rat, which is a taunt. Battle Cry, your opponent summons a random. It says when it says summon, I don't know if they get the Battle Cry. I don't know how it works. If it just gets thrown into play, this can be used as a counter to some sort of Battle Cries, I guess. But it's on average just seems like too easy to get wrecked by playing this card. And if it ever is actually like good and it becomes mainstream, you just start mulliganing in a different way against people sometimes. Like maybe you keep your expensive minion if you already have a decent curve. Maybe if I already have some early game, maybe I'll just keep my Doomguard. I don't know. It's not the worst card. It's definitely interesting. I don't see how to get a benefit out of it consistently. Maybe with like Mind Control Tech or something. We got Blubber Baron. I think this card's just too slow to get going to really be worth it. There's better stuff you can put in your deck for 3 mana. I like the art, though. It's kind of a common theme here. I like the art on a lot of cards in this expansion. Fel Orc Soul Fiend, start of your turn, deal 2 damage to this minion. I mean, it's 3 mana, 3/5, and it deals 2 to itself every single turn. If that's good enough for Resurrect Priest, then more power to them. You can Purify it, which I like. It's not unplayable. If you do play it, you put it in Priest. Other than that, though, not the strongest card in the world, I guess. It's definitely interesting, though. It's like almost really good, you know? If it was a 3/8, it'd probably be too good. Burgly Bully. This is whenever your opponent casts a spell, add a coin to your hand. Cards like this will never see play, in my opinion. They're trying to make like a more tame version of Lothab, just in case the counterfeit coin Miracle Rogue is too good. But the reality is, getting a coin is not going to stop you from being in like a losing position too much. I mean, God, maybe it's, I don't know. I don't see a time when you would put this in your deck over another card, right? So many decks have 5-drops. Every Azure Drake deck has too many 5-drops. There's a lot of Azure Drake decks. Burgly Bully is just like another card that, I mean, it'll be powerful because I think it'll be a very spell-based meta. There'll be a ton of spells flying around, especially out of Druid and Rogue and Mage. But with that said, like, how good is getting a coin, you know? Like, maybe you play this in a ramp Druid so that you can actually take advantage of the coin you get. Maybe you play it in, like, Tempo Mage. Like, I don't really know what deck you're putting this in that it's worth it. But, yeah. We got Defias Cleaner, Battlecry, Silence, a minion with Death Rattle. So, way better stats and way more selective on the Silence target. Again, these are like role player cards, right? Like, if certain things happen in the metagame, you might run these things. You know, if there's just too much Sylvanas and Entomb rotates out, well, Priest is still going to play the 5-mana guy over this. But some classes that want like a Boulder Fist Ogre may choose to play this if they have a weakness to something like Sylvanas. But unlikely. I think it's probably just not going to see play. Spellbreaker's extra versatility is better. Fight Promoter says if you control a minion with 6 or more health, draw 2 cards. It counts itself, right? If you buff it. It's an interesting card. Is that better than like Savannah, Highmane, and Hunter? Probably not. I think it's just not good enough to see play, too inconsistent. There's a small chance. You can play it with a few different things, power overwhelming and stuff. I don't know. I think just one of those cards that's too much work. If I have to ask myself if it's good enough after this expansion, it's probably not good enough because there's going to be so many playables. And then we got the Hog Leader, Battlecry. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand, gain charge. Maybe in like a Cold Light Oracle deck, this could see some amount of play, but you know, outside of like Fatigue Mage playing Cold Light Oracle and attacking with this, I just don't see it being that strong. Yeah. Maybe, just maybe, there's a situation where it's worth putting in your deck, but I think it's pretty rare. Wind Up Burglebot, just pretty bad. Whenever it attacks and survives, you draw a card. There's better ways to draw cards. There's cheaper ways to get a 5/5. Patches the Pirate. Oh my god, this card is going to tilt me more than like anything else in this expansion. Let me set this up for you, alright? I'm going to have 2 mana. I'm going to have 2 options. I can either use the 2 mana to set up a hero power or play my 2-drop, or I can inefficiently play my 1-mana Pirate just to get Patches out of my deck. Now, I'm going to say out loud to my stream, well, it's better to be mana efficient because it's only a 1 in 24 chance that I draw Patches next turn. And then I'm going to draw Patches next turn. And then the stream is going to end. And this is going to be a pretty common thing, I think. This is another example of them moving away from board-based RNG into card draw-based RNG. But is the card good? Yes. It may single-handedly make Tempo Rogue a actual deck. It's powerful. I'll see play in every Pirate deck moving forward. It's an inherently broken effect. There's a reason that they've avoided printing this card the same time Ship's Cannon was in the format. Keeps getting pushed back to other expansions. Patches is strong. Patches is super strong. Yeah. Excuse me. All right. Auction Master Beardo. After you cast a spell, refresh your hero power. I think you play this in the Priest deck with the 5 mana, like what was it called? Raza Unchained. If you have a 0 mana hero power, you can do some crazy stuff with this. It's a powerful card, kind of throwing back the TGT a little bit. It's going to work with some Inspire minions that you might be playing back then. Not good enough for most decks, but it is a strictly better Spider tank that's finally available in neutral, which we haven't had for a while, to my knowledge, I think. No, we've had Twilight Elder. Well, regardless, this actually has upside. But yeah, interesting card. We got Sergeant Sally, which is actually very relevant AoE. I'm pretty sure you play this in Reno Lock. Even though you only have Power Overwhelming to work with it, it might just be enough. It's a really weird card, but it's also a card that, like, when it's a potentially strong neutral AoE spell, that's something to take a lot of notice of, right? Let's say I'm playing like Aggro Paladin, and I'm playing a lot of buffs, right? Because I'm trying to make my 1 mana guy draw me a card when he dies. Sergeant Sally, even though I'm playing an aggressive deck, all of a sudden she's an AoE card that I should be playing. So if I have board control and I play Sally, I don't know, like they have to spend like time killing it before they play minions. If they don't, you can Blessing of Kings it, attack the minion. Sally's a good card, like a very, very good card. It's going to take some time to figure out the optimal place to put it, though. But it's possible that like Zoo with abusives and double Power Overwhelming is where it should be. I could definitely see it being played in Wild, for example. Yeah, interesting card for sure. Yeah, Genzo the Shark, which I'm actually going to put in a lot of decks to start off just to see if it's good. I'm going to try it in Zoo and see if it's good. I'm going to try it in like Aggro Paladin as a 3rd copy of Divine Favor. Pretty much any suicidally aggressive decks, right? I'll try it in Hunter probably. There's just so many lists you can test it in just to see if it's good enough. The stats are strong. The ability is super strong. It's a good card, I think. The question is it better than other 4-drops like Houndmaster and stuff like that? That's really the tough question, right? I don't know until I play with it a lot, but it looks very playable. Now we got Finja the Flying Star. Yeah, I mean, you'll play it in the Paladin Murloc deck. I don't know how good it'll be. You probably want to play Leroy in that deck anyway, just to skillfully earn some wins off the top. If you play Leroy combos with this because, like, if your opponent has Finja, you're not going to play low attack minions into it. You're going to play high attack minions. So you're going to want to give them whelps sometimes with this. That's a very like niche scenario, but I can see it coming up. But yeah, Finja is a really tough card to evaluate. I think that a 5 mana 2/4 stealth with this specific effect, like the power level of the effect is going to depend on how strong the Murlocs in your deck are. It's just like so many variables to account for. I think you just play it in that deck because why not? Like if it's not good enough in the Murloc deck, it's not good enough anywhere. You should at least test it. But I think the Murloc deck is unlikely to be too competitive. If it is, though, you do play this card in it. I'm fairly certain. I think for the Murloc deck, it is good enough. I just think the Murloc deck itself is not good enough. Madame Goya, choose a friendly minion, swap it with a minion in your deck. There might be some weird combo deck that plays like 3 minions with this, but I just don't see it. Like, it can put a minion back in your deck that you want in there sometimes, but I think it's just too expensive, too clunky, too weird to consistently make use of and get positive value out of. So I don't expect too much out of Madame Goya. Then we got Rathian, the second to last card here. Taunt, Battle Cry, draw cards until you draw one that isn't a dragon. Rathian is interesting. There's going to be other 6-drop options in dragon decks. The aggressive ones have Draconid Crusher. The defensive ones have Bookworm or the Priest Potion. So to play a 6-mana guy that just draws you some cards makes you really wonder is it good enough if it only draws one? That's a really tough question to answer. I think that because it's not a dragon itself, the answer is no. I think if you compare it to Azure Drake, I would rather just pay 1 less mana and also have a dragon in my hand. So I expect Rathian to not make the cut in a dragon decks in general, which is like something that's pretty bold to say because it's literally a legendary crafted for dragon decks with pretty clear value. I just think that, like, on average, I don't know, maybe I'm only thinking of the worst case scenario, but even in the best case scenario, drawing a bunch of cards doesn't always change whether you win or lose. What does change whether you win or lose is tempo, and I would rather get the tempo from playing a Bookworm or a removal spell, almost always. And then we got Mayor Noggenfogger. Flavor text is, fuck you, Reynad. I assume this works with attacks, too. It's like a really big Mogre the Ogre that works for spells, too. That's how I'm assuming this works. So if I attack an enemy minion, can my minion redirect to my own minion, like misdirection, or can I only attack other enemy minions? I don't really know how it works. If it's 100% chaotic and my own swipes can target my own stuff, even though it says only enemy thing, I don't know. Well, that's probably doesn't work like that. But if my own minions can attack my own minions with this on the board, then it gets interesting. It's actually a pretty powerful effect in a lot of ways that, I don't know, you can do some crazy stuff with. If your opponent has a lot of minions and you, like, if it actually works like misdirection, imagine playing this on a board where they have like 6 or 7 dudes. You need like a Deathwing or a Yogg-Saron. So that they can't play a removal spell because it'll shoot their own guy, right? If they attack, they'll trade into their own guy. You wipe like most of their board. So I think Mayor Noggenfogger is actually maybe strong if minion attacks can do a 180 and attack, you know, the person's own minions. But if not, then it's just a very weak defensive option. It's probably not going to see any play. So anyway, that's my Mean Streets of Gadgetzan set review. I've been talking for 2.5 hours. I've had 1 hour of sleep. I was supposed to start streaming 2.5 hours ago. Oh my god. I'm still going to do it, I promise. It'll be a short one, though. Thank you guys for watching. Much appreciated. Sorry I'm like completely out of it. I've never been on so little sleep when I've done one of these things before. But hopefully you liked it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll try to answer. If you have anything you agree or disagree with, let me know too. Unless you disagree, in which case, it's a family show. I'm not going to... It's not my stream. I'm not going to swear. It's fine. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. If you want to give me a sub, I'm trying to do more YouTube content that's actually like me sitting down and giving good content as opposed to streaming and just complaining about the game all the time. So yeah, I recommend you check out some of the other videos on this channel. I'm proud of a lot of the videos here, and I actually think they're like pretty good Hearthstone content. So thanks for watching. See you next time. Before you go, remember to click that coins link. Learn a bit about that. Yeah? It's the big 50% promo is about to end like 4 hours after I record this, so that's probably gone. But they still have really big deals all the time. And if you're about to buy a bunch of packs of the expansion, like, trust me, it will. It's a bit of a headache to set up, but it will save you a ton of money. And yeah. It's a nice thing about Amazon Coins. Legitimate company. They support a bunch of Hearthstone streamers, help us do this for a living. So if you guys at least click the link, it helps me out. All right. See you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.